Good? Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. We're returning from executive session. I'm going to call to order a regular meeting of Hastings on Hudson Board of Education for March 19th, 2024. A quick note, the printed agenda has public comment first, but we had planned in order to get the details of the budget up front to start off with the budget presentation. It will be followed immediately by the public comment, just to note. Do we want to make any announcements or just the ones that are in public content on board docs?
Yeah, board docs under 1B lists a series of announcements. I might flag for the listening public or high school parents that Thursday evening there'll be another meet and greet with Andy Clayman, the incoming principal, who will be here all day in district meeting with students and staff and all the rest. Everything else here is listed. Oh, I guess I should remind you that next week is spring recess, and we are due back on Monday, April 1. So, just so everybody's clear.
That's not a joke, right?
April 1 is April Fool's Day for me only.
All right. So we're going to move on to the budget presentation of the business official Maria Carvalho, and I think the theme tonight, the angle, the lens is curriculum and instruction. Would that be accurate to say?
Yes, we're going into a bit more detail on our. Tonight we'll get into more of a line by line of our instructional budget. Although, as we go through the presentation, we will show the details and then we'll kind of hit some highlights. But that, during the presentation, of course, you'd be able to ask questions if you need clarification on something.
Yeah, right. So let me just open up a wee bit here. First off, there are a number of aspects of this budget where there have been questions coming in, so I thought as superintendent it would be helpful to do this budget presentation first, then get into any amount of public comment there is. That way we're being most sharing of information, most clear about where we are. You're in a multi-meeting process, board, as it relates to the budget. You're hearing more tonight, listening to us, questions from us. There may be public comment on any aspect of the budget. I think it's just good for me to get that information out, then listen to what the comments are. We have future meetings, future ways to interact amongst ourselves, always in public, and then other ways to follow up. So the first several slides here, and again I thank Maureen for really putting together a very detailed deck. The presentation from the last meeting is up on the dedicated website. You can go in there and see all the dates, all the key decision points for you as a board, also the community see it, and you already can begin to see the cascading presentations. The last presentation is up. This one will go up as well. These are quite detailed because they stand alone, and we want people who may not be at the meeting or might not be able to see it on the screen to be able to go back and study with some clarity what was presented to you and through you to the community. The first several slides here are setting the stage. Slide 1 gives you the key dates, and the check marks tell you what you've accomplished. So we already are optimistic we'll get through tonight's meeting, so we put a check mark by March 19th. But you have some other, I appreciate you found the humor there. And you can see that we'll end up on May 21 with a budget and trustee vote. The other slides here restate what are the priorities for us with the budget, what we're aiming to do. And then what you will see tonight, as was mentioned by Alex, it's substantially an instructional budget presentation. Purpose of the budget, not going to go back through that. Again, that's part of the first presentation. It's here again. I would emphasize the framing from the Portrait of a Hastings Learner. That is our emerging intellectual and philosophical framework for us as a district, building that out as we go in a fostering way, not a forcing way. But what's important to me in the portrait is that is Hastings. That language, if you've looked at it and studied it, it came from Hastings faculty, students, and it really reflects who we are as a district. Budget goals are listed again on slide 5. Again, not to repeat those, but we just want to have that front-end material here. Then major drivers of expenses are listed here. As you've heard before, some of us, rightly so, spend time learning from other districts, and in that, with a lot of superintendents, this is a very difficult couple years we're going into regarding budgets. Districts not too far from us that are well-to-do districts are going to be going over the cap, looking for override votes. Just in Connecticut, not far from us, where they don't have the opportunity of cash reserves, they're looking at 5-6% increases on their budgets. We're at 353, and we're hoping to keep it at 353. And actually then looking back within Westchester, southern Westchester, and all of the several counties here, 353 is a very good number. So it reflects our desire to have a strong budget for all of our students, faculty, staff, and also respect the taxpayers, the residents of Hastings, with a modest increase. The drivers here, much of our increase, it's what roughly a $2 million increase in dollar terms, and about half of that is driven by externalities, insurance, other things like that. And this is what's really causing challenges.
There are things outside of the district, and again, this is just a few bullet points here. There are many others, but again, just to kind of, things that happen outside of our district have a direct impact on how, on how we develop our budget. So again, one of the things we spoke at length even prior to our first budget presentation, I think we brought this to you when it was emerging in December and January, was that the state was predicting either a flat budget, meaning within their complete spending plan, that without now the expiration of the federal aids that we also received, as did New York State, to fully fund districts at the same level as they did last year was going to be not possible. And as well as just overall, the state has some significant funding gaps that the New York State Controller in his fiscal report, even with the current governor's proposal, he's suggesting that the state is unable to afford that proposal, even as it stands today. So the current proposal that the governor is projecting for Hastings, it would mean we would be seeing a decrease in what we received this year, as well as proposals that would further impact or reduce the amount of state aid we would see in the foreseeable future. So again, those are things that even before we start looking at our budget and the costs of what we do locally have an impact on how much additional dollars we need to raise. So any reduction in any outside revenues we receive has to be made up with by tax dollars. So, and then how that fits into the other monies we have available. And then at the district, and then again, Bill had mentioned, we also have the retirement systems that are managed by New York State very well, but yet they are still, there's still some significant increases we're seeing there in terms of our contribution to those. And at the district level, something that as we create our budget, we are not only looking at the upcoming fiscal year, but we're also, as required and as we always do, we look at what does that look like over a 5-year period. And this evening, we're not going to go over the 5-year budget, but the upcoming meeting, we're going to then really dig into that, because it is extremely important to look at that, because if you are just budgeting 1 year over the next, you're not thinking about what the impact of those, of what you're budgeting for the following year. You can see there's those budget gaps. So our funding is relatively flat. We're only able, under the tax cap, to levy up until this year 3.19, but in other years that number is sub 2. So in those years, if you're creating a budget that is larger than that, it's unsustainable. So as we are looking at what we're proposing next year, we also look at what does that mean in the following year, right? So we are constantly looking at it in that context. So it's extremely important as we consider what we're recommending next year that we're thinking of those future years, and that's where the careful management of the reserves is critical. And as we look at the overview slide, you'll see what the recommendation is in terms of appropriated fund balance, and we're not at that slide yet, but when I get there, you'll see why I speak to if you use too much of your reserves or your savings or your offsetting, you're actually hurting yourself down the road. And as we look at the 5-year budget next week, in our next meeting, we'll kind of highlight how that would occur. We've shared these numbers before, and again, just to remind you, our budget to budget 3.53, And we are proposing in our current budget to levy up to that 3.19 allowable tax cap. Again, the tax rate is determined by using the current assessed valuation. And although it shows negative there, that's really just a reflection because you have an increase of your assessment. But in actuality, this budget, for the most part, will cost taxpayers an additional 3.19%. A little bit different depending on your change in assessment. A reminder, we put these up there last time, so as we, beyond our rollover budget, and we do use a zero-based budgeting practice, meaning we look at each year our enrollments, the needs of each individual student department, and we start from there. This budget also includes these increases that you see, and again, we've spoken about these at an earlier meeting. We are almost at a 2.0 increase of FTEs in the special area of special education. There's some additional funding for theater, which is really driven on the number of shows and what we're currently basically spending on theater. And then the remainder of the items there were some things that with our COVID monies that were given to us through grants, we were able to either expand certain roles that we had in the district and also purchase some additional resources. And we had the opportunity to have those funded through these COVID monies. And although there's an expiration of those monies, we believe that what you see, those 0.2s and 0.4s and such, those were items that we felt should be rolled into the budget. There were other things that were in those monies that we're not recommending come in. So in terms of new budget proposals, we've included 370,000 of those. Again, these are just some high-level numbers here, and we'll talk about them at a later time in more detail. I think we touched upon it last time. Currently, we have a transfer of $550,000 in this current year's budget to capital. Next year, we are recommending a $275,000 transfer. And again, as we get into what that money will be used for at a later meeting, because tonight we really want to focus on the instructional budget, but we will have time to kind of detail out for the board what that money is necessary for. And this budget, again, as we show how we balance this budget, we are recommending an increase of appropriated fund balance, as well as an increase of use of reserves. But we want to be very cautious here. We did feel comfortable doing it, but cautiously so. And if there were any restoration of any state aid, by the time the legislators and the governor are done wrangling, we would recommend to reduce these, to not necessarily change the budget, but to reduce the amount of appropriated fund balance. And again, in speaking about, the ability to keep that level of funding up would be difficult for us in future budgets. So again, we want to continue to keep a more conservative approach of use of those funds. We spoke about this before. This is just a demonstration of before we were adding an additional item to our budget. Just with our current staffing model this year, if nothing were to change, we would have to increase the budget somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.6 to $2 million just to cover what we're offering today. So now we're going to get into the budget overview. So again, this is just a snapshot of, and this is in a summary format. So on the top, you can see where our current adopted budget was, which is $57,609,000. And next year we are proposing a spending plan of a little bit less than $60 million at $59,645,000. That's coming with about a $2 million, well, it is a $2 million increase of spending. And as you can see on the previous slide, even just to continue with what today, just year over year, we're looking at almost a $1.5 million to $1.6 million increase just with no changes. And again, there are other things that are changing within this budget that, are individual student needs and the rest. And how do we balance our budget? So we are required to bring to taxpayers what is a balanced budget. Our revenues have to pay for our expenditures, and you can see the things that make up our budget. And a reminder, the state aid, I just want to highlight this line because you've heard Bill and I refer to a reduction in state aid. But as you can see from a budget to budget standpoint, it's in fact going up about $200,000. But this current year, we're actually receiving about $8.4 million. So when we develop our budget at that time, there's some of the final budget, state budget, at times is, we don't know each, because many of that state aid number, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think how best to explain this. So we were given a proposal from the state. There's a lot of estimates in that proposal. Some of it is driven on our expenditures drive some of that aid. So at the time, we always take a very conservative approach of what number we use to balance our budget. At that time, we were receiving an estimate of somewhere in the $8 million range, but there were some numbers that were not fully, until you close your fiscal year, you don't really know that exact dollar amount. What actually did happen is we did receive some additional expenditure-driven aids this year, and that's what brought us up to the actual receipts of $8.4 million. The $8 million you see here is reflective of the governor's proposal for us. If you look at what the governor's proposal says online, it would reflect a higher number, but they also include $500,000 for pre-K, which we don't have. So there's still a continuous push for that in the state of New York. Right now, I think we should receive the $8 million, and as I mentioned, if there's a few dollars that come back in, another 100,000 or so, our recommendation would be to reduce the amount we're using out of our savings account, because again, we really, in order to balance this budget is why we appropriated funds there. On our miscellaneous receipts, and we've just at a high level, I'll give you some details of what that includes. That's our interest income, our portion of the county sales tax we receive. We do receive tuition for both parentally placed students in the district as well as special ed students placed by other districts, as well as just some refunds and admissions to events we have in the school. And that's what makes up that $1.9 million that we received this year. Although this year we received more than we had budgeted for there, that's mostly driven on our interest income. As we all know, interest income went during COVID from 0%, right? People were receiving 0% almost on their monies to about 5%. We're receiving a little bit over 5% on the money we have on hand, and that's largely driving that increase. The one thing that we are predicting for next year, not predicting, we know, we have a significant drop in our tuitions. We have many of our students either graduating, we're not replacing those with new students. So the reduction there is driven mostly by a reduction in people placing either through school districts or parents themselves. But so again, that's $82,000 we're receiving less this year. So just to kind of, it matters not only what you're spending, but what revenues you may or may not be getting. We are recommending those increases I had mentioned from appropriated fund balance. This year we used $354,000. Next year we're recommending an increase of about $200,000 to that line. The retirement reserve also, with the increase in the amount we have to pay into the retirement system because of the increase in the rate of payment, we are also recommending an increase of about $200,000 there. And then a small increase of use of reserve for tax certiorari. So the remainder to balance our budget is in that property tax line, which again, we are at our total allowable limit, which is $1.4 million. But as you can see with the other revenue numbers, if our budget is growing by $2 million and we only could raise 1.4, we immediately started with a gap of $600,000 to close. And if we didn't have those reserves on hand, which again we're not always able to replenish, or they could run out at one point, that's how you end up with those big funding gaps. Because what's occurring is that our expenses are growing at a larger rate than our allowable tax levy. And not dissimilar to other districts, that's always the challenge, and how do you get those numbers to balance each other? Okay. We've shared this before, and I'm not going to run through each of them, but I think it's good to share it as far as this budget presentation, because as we look at our budget, and as I mentioned, it's close to about $60 million recommended for next year, you can see it's how we spend our money. How do we prioritize the money in Hastings? And this is comparing us against all the other districts in Westchester County, as well as some in Putnam. And as you can see, and it looks at total dollars spent as a percentage of your total budget compared to other districts. So as you can see, we continue to be first out of 48 districts in our instructional spending. What does that mean? Other districts have more admin, other things that we do not have. So just as an example, or other expenses, or maybe higher transportation costs and all the rest. But I think that shows the commitment to investing, and this is really in the teaching line. When we say instructional budget, we're speaking about actual teachers and in that instructional program. We are, again, that's pretty significant that we're number one, I mean, out of Westchester County. Again, co-curricular and interscholastic spending, I think occasionally people may think we're either not spending as much as our counterparts in those areas, but you can clearly see that we are fourth in this category out of 48 districts. The next one is just about, and I'm not going to, this is to do with the teacher's contract and how does that rank? And again, although we're ranking first in instructional spending, we're not first in what we pay our staff. We're 18th out of about 52. And when you see there's different numbers of people, that's just to do with how many people reported. So that may have captured some more districts in Rockland, and where sometimes not everyone reports all their spending. And again, just to kind of go, we look at our class sizes, are we favorable, and things we offer. So on all those comparisons, we are we're favorably. I'm not going to go through this line by line again, but as you can see, I broke out that other revenue, and this shows you the details, a little bit further details in those different categories. And again, as you can see, as I had mentioned earlier, where we're seeing the reductions in revenues are in those tuition lines. And again, this is something that we cautiously budget those lines because, again, year to year, they're not guarantees. Districts some occasionally place students here. There's years in which we've received $500,000 and $600,000 or $700,000 in tuition from out of district, other schools placing students here, but it all depends on what their needs may be in a given year. So those are not dollars we can rely on. When we get them, we're happy to receive them. And if it works for both districts, that's fine. But again, we have to rely on our two main sources, which are state aid and our property tax base. And again, I just added a couple highlights here in terms of things that are either changing significantly or new. And you'll see here, although I think we may receive a small payment at the end of this fiscal year, next year we'll start receiving regular payments on the solar rental and the licensing fees for the arrangement we have with Community Solar. Tax cap, this is something that we report, we provide each year in our budget documents as well as our newsletter. It is a legally required disclosure. And again, it just shows the factors that go into our calculation of what the tax cap number is for Hastings. And everyone has the same, have to use the same elements to come up with what their formula will be. And all the allowable levy growth factor is the same for all districts. The thing that is individual is that tax-based growth factor, and that is based upon real assessment growth in the village of Hastings. So again, just to remind everyone, 3.19, and as an example, we're happy to have that tax-based growth because without it, we would have only been able to levy 2%, and we would be talking about a much different budget. That would have required us to cut, trying to think with it, a few, like at least $300,000 or $400,000 more. And, that we have had years when we have had no growth. So just to kind of, hit on that also. Again, revenue challenge is no different than most of our neighbors in Westchester because the state aid formula that we receive is based on a wealth factor. And that wealth factor is driven largely on property wealth. And as we know in Westchester County, there's a lot of property wealth. So as much as this impacts us, it also impacts districts that maybe people in Westchester wouldn't consider as wealthy, such as Yonkers, Mount Vernon, White Plains, New Rochelle, Peekskill. They're also negatively impacted by the way Westchester is perceived. And that perception is also how the state generates the amount of monies we receive. So, these are things that are difficult for many of us in Westchester. And again, working within the tax cap is challenging. So even if there was a need or a significant increase in expenses for us, we would still be limited to that tax cap formula. Oh, sorry, I went too far. Okay, so this is just our chart of the last 5 years of our overall district enrollment, and we just wanted to include this year. We will break it down, what we're anticipating next year. And as you can see, over the last 5 years, COVID was the only year where we had some of the younger students being kept at home and not, people held some of their kindergartners back. It's not on this chart. But as you can see, we have been in this 1,600 to almost 1,700 range for the last several years. And we anticipate, as we look at our enrollment models, we anticipate this somewhere in that 16 to 1675 range in the upcoming years, beyond what is on this chart as well. But again, it's just to demonstrate that we've, I think sometimes people may have thought that either enrollment have gone down, but we've remained relatively steady. And this is just, again, in a graphical form to show that, going up 50 or going down 50 students for us is not a significant shift, so even if we were to go down 30 or 40 students, it would not have significant, we wouldn't have a huge impact on our budget one way or the other. As you can see for next year, Hillside, currently there are 560 students with 29 sections, but next year we are anticipating a reduction of 1 section, and you can see where that falls. Our current K cohort is currently 101 students, and we are recommending that next year in first grade that would be brought down to 5 sections, and we feel that's a manageable number. Currently they're about 16 to 17 per class for kindergarten, and for next year they'd be either 20 to 21 in each of those first grade classrooms. So we did show this in an earlier slide. We are anticipating one teacher reduction at Hillside, and this also has an impact across the special areas. So when there's a reduction in sections, the specials also typically are lower. Because there's less.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Yes.
I just got a message from a parent that says that the sound isn't working well. It keeps coming in and out. Oh, you know it? Okay. Sorry, Patrick. Sorry, Maureen.
Oh, no, that's fine. Actually, I had a couple texts. I figured, usually I get them myself. Okay. So again, at Farragut Middle School next year, currently from grades 5 through 8, we are running 24 sections. And next year we are proposing to run 23. And you can see where that current 4th grade cohort, just go back a slide, is currently in 6 sections, but coming to the 5th grade next year. And again, this was something that, as we looked at our budget and trying to find efficiencies, we are dropping that current 4th grade from 6 sections to coming up to 5 sections in the 5th grade. And you can see the resulting class size for this upcoming 5th grade that has historically been in 6 sections at Hillside. So again, that reflects another reduction of 1 teacher at the Farragut Middle School. So that's accounting for the 2.0 K6 reductions that we have planned for this budget. At the high school, we are anticipating, wait, did I do that? Why is this? I'm sorry. Oh, yes. So at the high school, we are anticipating a relatively flat sections. You can see that the current 8th grade cohort is a little bit larger than the current 9th grade cohort. So where you'll see is that because they have a little bit more flexibility in the high school schedule with the different sections and teachers teaching different grade levels, there may be some English sections that they'll break into 7 sections, where the current 11th grade, you may see something between 5 and 6 sections. But overall, the staffing is relatively flat at the high school in terms of the major subject areas. Now we go into curriculum development. This is the department. Again, all of the departments, as a reminder, we use the state required codes to group our expenses, and that's what we're going to go through tonight. This is for the assistant superintendent salary, as well as the support person that works in that office, who oversees a lot of our professional development and helps ensure that people's licensing and credits and all that are done. It is really to support that curriculum office, not so much as a secretarial position as they're, handling a lot of that work. Again, this is relatively flat, and the increase there is really because the individual that is in that support role was not there for the full year this year, but will be there for the full year next year. So it's not as though they're receiving a 15% raise. It's just rather they were not there the full year this year. Supervision, this budget code covers all the principals and the assistant principals, as well as the clerical support in their offices. And as you can see, this number is going up about 26,000. We were able to, with a combination of some of our clerical positions, we are able to gain a good amount of efficiency in those offices, although it's only showing a reduction of about $8,000. In actuality, what we're spending this year is more than our budget, and then coupled with there would have been an increase there. So we are saving roughly about $35,000 by combining some clerical functions there. So that's a net number, again, the increase of 26,000. Instructional teaching. So again, you'll see here where the salary lines are reflecting that reduction at that case 6 first line. That's reflecting that reduction of 2.0 FTE that we spoke about. The one less section at Hillside, as well as the one less section at Farragut Middle School projected for next year. We're also anticipating some retirements in this that is also helping smooth some of these numbers down, and as well as a reduction in some of the specials. And Melissa will, on a further slide, will get into greater detail around that reduction. Substitute teachers, again, this number, we're seeing a significant increase for 2 factors. We are paying our substitutes more in order to be able to attract them, as well as just the need for additional substitutes across the board. We're hoping that this number next year is sufficient. This year, although it says 260 estimated end of year, it's really tracking around 280. So again, this is just a reflection of what our actual costs are when we make these type of adjustments. We're, other than that, I don't want to go through line by line, but the non-instructional salaries that you see reflected here, this is, again, is not, it's showing a large budget to budget increase, but in fact, it's really reflecting what's currently happening at our buildings. And a lot of this has to do with monitors and staffing and support staff. It really is in all the various places that really help cover, and they cover a lot of classes as well beyond the substitutes. So we are seeing an uptick there, but again, this is something without it, we couldn't properly manage the students that we have.
Technical question.
Yep.
There are no chairperson in K-6? I'm just curious.
Excuse me?
We have coordinators.
You have coordinators,
Yes.
not chairperson?
No,
Correct.
correct.
Unless there are some chairs that are K-12 chairs.
Yes,
So
that's right.
music is a K-12 chair, for example.
Okay. And again, you can see here, we just wanted to highlight some items on here. And again, I mentioned the 2.0 reduction, the 0.6 decrease. Also, those items on the earlier slide, I should have put that here a little bit clearer. The items in which they were previously grant funded, we roll some of those into this budget. That includes the making the math interventionists and some of those positions full-time, as well as we did roll in and included in this funding for a full-time diversity coordinator. So that we've already had that, but the amount that was being lost through the state funding, we included in this budget. And Melissa will speak to the reduction of the 0.6.
And I also want to address, we received some emails, when it's budget season, as is customary. I think there are some misunderstandings out there too. So I just want to make sure that I highlight the anticipated shift to FTE, which we consider, full-time equivalent in terms of who our staff is. So last spring, we recognized the retirement of Mike Rubino with the understanding he'd come back as a 0.6. There were early conversations predating this current school year that position would not be needed beyond this current school year because of anticipated projections and thinking about enrollment trends and thinking about what the department was able to configure. So that was already part of the discussion moving into this current school year. And that happened with Mike and Lou at the high school level as they were figuring out, not only his retirement, but whether or not he would come back, and then this year, the 0.6. So as we entered the budget planning process for this school year, I worked very closely with John Carini, who is the music department chairperson, and it was time to revisit that discussion to see if anything had changed, where are we? And so one of the things I asked is, are we able to make sure we're maintaining all of our current programming, all of our current music lessons, like not disrupting our program if we don't put the 0.6 back in for the current school year? And, John got to work, and I want to commend him because he got very creative and he met with members of the department. This was an iterative approach, meaning we came back, we had multiple conversations. And so again, my question was, is there a way to make this work and making sure that we are preserving the full fidelity of our music program offerings? He came back with a couple of options that we talked through with the administrators. And what you see up here is what folks would be teaching, and that's the anticipated schedule with Mike Rubino's position not being restored based on what was already planned for this current upcoming school year. So John Carini would be teaching 3rd grade orchestra, 4th grade orchestra, 5th grade orchestra, 6th grade orchestra, high school recording technology. Katie Conkra would be K4 general music, Eric Day, 5th grade band, 6th grade band, 7th and 8th grade band, 7th and 8th grade orchestra, high school band and orchestra, high school AP music theory and jazz band. Doug Friedman, K4 general music, 4th grade band. Now 4th grade band would be new for Doug Friedman because he had really been focused on chorus, and so he and I actually have a call scheduled to talk about some additional professional learning that might be supportive in terms of that transition. So that is coming up in terms of my discussion with him about how to best support that. And then John Riss, 4th grade general music, 5th grade chorus, 6th grade chorus, 7th and 8th grade chorus, high school chorus, hillside chorus, high school music theory 1. And similarly, the shift for John, while I've seen him at the elementary level, he's been accompanying, he's been present there, this would be new for him in terms of the 4th grade general music and the hillside chorus. So there are discussions happening about making sure that we are helping folks who may want the additional professional learning. All of our music teachers are certified K-12. We are there. I've heard lots of different feedback areas around music, and I just want to reiterate, I've been assured that our entire program will remain as is, including the music lessons. So there are no offerings that will be shifted. Everything remains. And again, I do think there's some misinformation out there. I just wanted to make sure that I shared my conversations that I've had internally with our music department chairperson and our administrators. So the next question I would expect is, well, how is this possible? Because we are thinking about a 0.6 that we have now, and we are thinking about next year without a 0.6. So Maureen presented just a few short minutes ago that we are expecting some reductions in terms of elementary classes. We won't have the same number of classes because of class sizes and the reduction in kindergarten, the reduction in 5th grade. All of those classes get scheduled into specials, into general music classes. They're part of a master scheduling rotation. If the classes don't exist, there's no need for them to go somewhere, and therefore there are additional openings in a schedule. In addition to that, there is room in faculty schedule for music. So when you put those things together, if someone is not full, and then we have additional things happening where we are not in need of that scheduling, we are able to maintain our current program. So I did want to clear that up because I've heard things about, music lessons won't be offered. That's not true. I've been assured that we are preserving the full fidelity of our program, Again, more than one option was presented to the administrators on how we could do that. And then we worked together around making sure that we were sticking with the best option, both for children and for staff. And it has been historical that our music staff has traveled between buildings. That is not something that is new to us in Hastings.
Yeah, and let me just reiterate I've been pleased, all 3 districts I've led have been exceedingly strong in music, dedicated in music, and that's my commitment here. And so I had, when it became clear we had to sort of look at this, I went and sat with John, Eric, and John separately, just to talk about this issue where we are. Then Melissa rolled up her sleeves, worked extensively with John Carini, also then later conversing with all the music staff. The load you see here is the load they've been carrying. The modifications are for Doug and John Riss, but the movement across is standard, meaning from this building to Hillside and back. And our commitment is to, if the board, as the budget process rolls along, if you confirm this as part of the budget, our commitment is to watch this very closely in the coming year. And as we look at the out years, if the understandings here prove not to be the case, that there is slippage, we're going to find a way to correct that. Because again, I would not have come to Hastings if it wasn't such a strong place in the music, the performing arts, and theater. And so we did work this out directly with John Carini. I understand when you see a person disappear, a 0.6 disappear, how to add that all up gets confusing. But I think we had room then against that 0.6, the adjustments that Melissa's talked about that allow us to provide everything we're providing next year right through the lessons. And some of those lessons are actually quite small in ratio, far smaller than you see in most other districts. I've got 2 violin players sitting in Greenwich, my 10th grader and my 4th grader. So I understand, they're not of the stature of many of our musicians, but they care about it and play. And so I understand that balance between a class, a course, and those lessons. So our aim is to continue this, work very closely across the coming year with John Carini, who's been a wonderful partner on this to sort out how do we keep excellent music going in Hastings and make this adjustment.
Yeah. And just one last thought. I think any concern that's been expressed around this notion of a potential 0.6 cut to the music program, I'd also like to reframe. So in a zero-based budgeting situation where, any district is really responsible for making sure that we're making budgetary decisions based on needs. In this particular case, asking for that 0.6 is actually asking for an increase to the music program, because we are able to fill our current program, all of its offerings, without continuing the 0.6, as was originally discussed last year.
So let me clarify, if I would just break it down to thank you. If I would break it down to my own conceptual understanding, there is a scheduling situation where, based on the schedule, that instructional hour has been consumed within the scheduling that is the contractual obligation of the professors that are of the teachers that are currently
Correct.
there. So they are meeting those hours of obligation.
Yes.
And because that's what they are supposed to do.
Yes.
And so if that is all being met and the 0.6 is within it, then you mean adding another 0.6 would be extra.
Correct.
Okay, I wanted to get that in my head. Thank you.
Move on.
Yeah, and again, for you as a board, this is a piece of the larger budget. We're in a multi-phase review with you, and certainly we'll be talking more and more about this as we proceed.
Yes, and again, no different than every other, when people provide their staffing for their building, they put in what they actually need. So each FT, including P, and all the departments, all the sciences, each class that's run, ICT, anything, the sections of every item are broken down by, not by individual, by like need of schedule. So
I'm so
that,
sorry.
sorry.
I had a second question.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. So in terms of the community concern about the specific, I know you showed what each person is doing. Is it okay to highlight the specific, I know you showed each person and it was everything, but in terms of what the community think is missing, which is why they feel the 0.6 may be something that a specific programming may be missing. Is there a way, because of the takeaway based on the retirement, is there a way to, if you have the information, to point out those specific lessons that you think, because by virtue of showing everything, I'm just wondering, that concern that, okay, 0.6, this was what I saw happening musically. Now, where is it right now? Is what I'm asking, since you've already showed everything. Does that make sense?
It does.
But if you don't have it, you don't have
But-
to show it, just for the sake of those that feel
Yeah,
something is missing.
I mean, I don't have it in front of me,
Well,
That's
but,
okay.
well, I
If
mean,
I'm understanding the
yeah, having
question.
lived this in other districts where due to enrollment shifts and other ways, then you get the same work done. It's really what's here on slide 33. What lists here is all the work minus, I'm not sure lessons are listed here, but we will still provide that full complement of lessons from John, Katie, Eric, Doug, and John are able to provide that full coverage of the program, and the efficiencies we gain is slight enrollment shifts and then maximizing the full contracted time for each of these individuals. So this year, we found a way to say, okay, were we maximizing the contracts?
Right.
Well, that's a question. This next year, working with John Carini, we will maximize each of their full contracts to provide that full complement of programs, everything from lessons through the courses here. And let me flag, for example, a couple of these AP courses are very important, the AP Music Theory and others. Very small enrollment. Many districts, given what's going on around us, are eliminating small enrollment high school courses. We're not. We're holding on to them. So there might be 4 or 5 students in that, for example, AP Music Theory course. I'm guessing.
7.
Seven, but it's a very small number. Sub 10, many times districts around us, and very Well Hill District, eliminate those in that given year. We're not doing that because of our commitment to the full run. And then it's very much looking at this, and again, we partner with John Carini to build this, and then it's looking at over this next year how it's going, and if we've missed something, then going into a future year, we would assess, what has to get done. But we're confident, based on how this was built, that existing programming this year will continue next year. Final comment. Some might say, hey, grow us. We're not growing anywhere in this budget this year, anywhere across the organization, for all the reasons we've listed. We're staying flat around personnel, programs. We have reduced custodial. We have reduced clerical. We've reduced a number of places. So unfortunately, right now, we're not able to add, except where, rightly so, where we might have some special ed needs for children with identified needs, and we are morally
driven by
obligated to
IP,
meet
yeah.
those. That's a different arrangement. But otherwise, we're not able to expand and grow for all the budgetary reasons we're talking about. So it's a little bit longer answer.
I mean, I think it's very good. What I was asking was very
Yeah, no,
technical, but I understand.
it-
has to do with
it-
where it actually
it-
sits.
Correct.
No,
because- Correct.
Yeah,
But
it-
it's totally fine.
Yeah,
Dr.
no,
Marquez, you-
okay.
you
So why don't, all right, why
I
don't we
just want
keep
to say one
moving?
other thing about any teacher, any employee, they work by contract, right? So they're required, all teachers, no matter what they teach, only teach their schedule is based upon, they have a lunch, a prep, a professional. And the minutes that we pay, whether it's science, music, PE, is covered in this budget. So to Melissa's point, if it's covered, the idea like if people, but they're doing what the exact amount of minutes we pay teachers for, and then for a music teacher, it's 220 minutes a day, is what they have to have contact time with students, and that's what this reflects. So, I just want to be, just like every other teacher, because they have a contract and we have to honor that, and if we're out of, when we don't, we know about it, right? So the idea that no matter who, right, people are all, everything is covered within what we're paying people for and not exceeding that. You know what I mean? So whether, as Melissa said, they're shared, which is not uncommon we have speech and language people who are shared. We have OTs that are shared. We have psychologists that are shared. We have music teachers that are shared, sometimes PE. So, but all of them at the end of the day cannot work beyond their contract. And that, so what we're doing here, and even with the shifts, everyone's within the contract in which they're
paid for, similar to their counterparts. So I just want to make sure that I know there was something that people thought maybe we were having people work more, but that's not, that we're not legally allowed to do that, is all I want to mention. Okay. And even with the travel time too, we have to account for that in their actual workday. We're required to. So on to the contractual services here. Again, we'll go at a high level, and these are just things, again, we're required to group expenses in a certain category. There's things in which that are just participation in Westchester Teacher Center and different things that all districts like ourselves participate in. It allows our teachers to take professional development and opportunities that they would not have access to unless we are part of that. And then within the individual schools, there's expenses for either having different types of assemblies and different expenses, and all of those are broken down. There's typically, the way these numbers are derived is they're based on a per student allocation by building. So each school kind of has a certain budget assigned to them based on their enrollment, and then they break it down based upon what their expenses are. So some of them are captured under the contractual, others under the supplies, and you can see where the high school's actually down next year, and that's because they shifted some of their monies in other areas where they felt they had a greater need, because they have that flexibility. One thing I do want to highlight on this slide deck, which is this year that there is a student currently that we're paying for. Parents in district do have the ability to enroll their children's charter schools outside this district, and we are required to both bus them as well as pay that tuition. So although doesn't happen typically, this has happened before, but that's just an example of that's a legal requirement.
Bus them no matter where the school.
Well, it's a charter school, right? So it's still within it's still considered under like an out of district placement. It is a public, it's funded right by however they fully get funded. But as an example, we did have a person who had started here and they were unhappy, so they went to a charter school. And I mean, because they came from that world. I don't want to say they were unhappy here, but the child was happier in the previous district, and we know they're slated to continue there next year, but I believe they may even have other students. So this is something we have to keep our eye on. It doesn't happen to us often. This happens more in New York. You hear a lot of this in the newspaper about New York City and the DOE getting upset about charter schools because more so it's not a statement on charter schools. I understand that, that's an individual choice, but wherever the child resides, that school district is required to pay the tuition to that charter school for that child. So we did have this a few years ago where some parents were opting to keep their kids in charter schools in the city pre-K, and we did have to pay for those placements as well. But this was something that was like an unanticipated expense. They're there, and they also needed a bus. So between that and the busing was about a $40,000 hit for us. Again, these are just, as I've done on either, just try to highlight areas in which we're seeing some shifts. As you look at the details, if you haven't already done so, you'll see where if there's an increase in that contractual professional learning. Again, this goes back and relates to the fact that we were able to put a lot of those expenses into those COVID funds that we received from federal funding, and as those funds have expired, there's still those expenses that exist, and sometimes it's like mandatory training that our staff does need to participate in. BOCES. So BOCES, you'll see here this, BOCES is a really good organization for schools like ours because they're set up regionally. Districts are required to be part of a BOCES, meaning whether we use any services from them or not, we are required to pay in an administration and capital fee, and that's driven on a state requirement. But BOCES works well because as a small district, there's many things that we would not be able to do individually without them. So one example of that is that many of our students participate in their career and technical programs. For some special ed students, it's a requirement of their ability to graduate high school, right? But I think they're high-end programs that we're able to access at a very efficient cost, as well as other things. They also provide a lot of special, staff development and professional learning. And with other districts, they come together, so where you would have one trainer and then maybe you have 15 districts that are able to participate in that. So it's an extremely excellent resource for districts, especially small ones. So districts like maybe Yonkers and White Plains that can run things on their own. You know, small districts like Hastings and others really have a heavy participation as we do in BOCES. Another highlight of using BOCES for those that may not know is that for all the expenditures we make with them that you see here in the budget, the following school year we get about 50% and it's sometimes even higher reimbursement for that. So it's the way of the state. New York State it wants to incentivize districts to do things shared, which really is shared service model, right? So where districts would not be able to offer these otherwise. So with every expense that you see that says BOCES, although this year, just an example, this portion of their BOCES bill, there's $264,000 worth of expenses. Next year, we would get $130,000 back or not more on that. So about $1 million of our aid, $1.4 million of the aid we received this year in the district was just on BOCES reimbursement because we spent about $2.4 million with them last year. And it's mostly under the area of technology. And as you know, most districts are using them to run their technology programs. Here, Melissa, I don't know if you just want to highlight a couple things under the curriculum development area.
Sure, we have many things anticipated for our curriculum review cycle under the broad umbrella of Portrait of a Hastings Learner, specifically authentic learning. So those things are getting threaded together. So some years ago, the Professional Learning Committee designed that curriculum review cycle. What you see here is where we are in terms of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, inquiry, pilot, implementation, and then assessment, essentially. So we have a formal inquiry that is underway in ELA. For this year, we've started that. It's had a little bit of a delay, so I anticipate that that will carry over into the fall along with implementation efforts. So it's both of those things. So we're still on track for that implementation work. Fine and Performing Arts is in the cycle for an inquiry, a curriculum review. And then we're still in our implementation work in mathematics. Reveal is going strong at the elementary school thanks to our wonderful teachers and all the great work that the math committee has done there. So we'll continue our implementation work with that. We're going to take another look at middle school mathematics because Big Ideas has been in for a few years. We're going to take a look at it. There is some interest to take a peek at Reveal and to just understand that a bit better and think about what that may mean. And social studies, we are thick in our implementation work around authentic learning, and the department has selected the intersection of social studies and ELA with a lens on AI, so using AI to leverage authentic instruction. That work has begun, it's going well, and we're starting to think now about how do we shift our practice. So that implementation work will be happening. We have a visit coming up. Katona is very graciously hosting us so that we can take a field trip and get out and see what other districts are doing, as we did with our math committee at the elementary school, to be able to see things in motion in other places before we move forward with piloting and implementation. So that is coming up. We've been working really closely with Leslie Accardo and Kelly Noka from Model Schools around staying cutting edge with our understanding of what's going on in AI world and how we need to keep up with it. And often in most places, students are ahead of the system because they're working with OpenAI, ChatGPT, other applications. And so we are thick in it with our social studies team now. And World Languages has done a lot of work around the new standards and then thinking about what the next level of work is there. In addition to what you see on the slide, we're in process with an inquiry in every core content area at the middle school, as Scott Wynn presented to you. So that is happening in a very differentiated sort of way. But those are some highlights and wonderful things to look forward to.
You want me to start on the SPED, Maureen?
Sure.
Yeah. So let me just hit the narrative on the SPED, just because one of my commitments as superintendent in coming here, and the board who hired me insisted I focus a big priority on special education. So these 3 bullet points, our commitment, really are at the core, and I really hope you look at the order of the moral, ethical, and legal. Often people in special ed start with the legal. And the reason legal exists is for decades, people have not done well in education by students with needs, special needs. But it's really a moral and ethical commitment. I'm really pleased with how Hastings has been that way and has really the last several years stepped up even more, and especially on the idea of inclusive learning models to support all students. And I'm out and about a lot in the classrooms, out in the hallways, certainly in our performances, and I see evidence of that inclusion in all kinds of ways. It's very real in Hastings. We are not perfect, and we have to do the continuous improvement piece here and keep at it. So Maureen will now give you sort of the highlights on the budget, but I would say from sitting with superintendents in the region a lot lately on budget issues, the concerns about increases are substantially around the medical insurance, they're around transportation, and they're around special education. So to have a 2.56, if I'm reading this correctly, a lot of work to get there. We can't base our decisions for special ed on financial. We cannot and we should not. That's an outcome we look at to see how it is, but right now, relative to many other districts in the region, that year-to-year change is healthy. And I would peg that back to, I think, what's working very, very well for us are the two assistant directors, both in terms of how they are able to work building and district-wide specific. And Marie Angela Sanchez joining Tessa Stewart has brought us really immense expertise, and her desire to leave the city after a very long record there as a psychologist and administrator of some 70 psychologists. She wanted to be hands-on more with students, and if you're at Hillside, you very much see her interacting in all kinds of ways. So I think that's the narrative that matters to me. Maureen may now work us through the dollars a little more specifically.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. So again, you'll see, as I mentioned earlier, we are projecting a need to increase approximately 2.0 special education teachers at actually the middle school here at Farragut Middle School, and you'll see the line there reflects the increase of that line, as well as the board knows that this number includes that as well as the salary increases that are contractually obligations we currently have to our current staffing there. You'll also see a increase similar, this is not an increase in staffing, but just again, a contractual increase for our teacher assistants. We are currently projecting approximately five special education aid reduction in this non-instructional salary line. I can tell you that although it is driven by students that either no longer will have a one-to-one teacher aide with them, these aides do also do a lot for our building level. So this was one of the more difficult reductions in terms of what I heard from the building administrators are they're really key staffing, and our children that have one-to-one aides, from the time they arrive to the time they leave, they have to have an adult with them at every minute of the day. And I think, of course, then the aides need to have their own breaks and their own lunches, which they occasionally get because they are on students 7.5 hours a day. They work an 8-hour workday, so they have a very different schedule. But I think making this work, we're hoping we can again, as we looked at our staff and we try to make it as efficient as possible, and this is at the max efficiency. This is reflecting where many students may have one aide is supporting 2 to 3 students. So, I think, again, as we looked at the budget, we did look at the zero-based budgeting and try to put exactly the FTEs we needed. I think that this line in particular we'll be having to keep our eye on, because if a student then between now and next year needs an aide, we have to, we're required to provide that aid to a student. So I mentioned that because that is, this budget, unlike any other part of our budget, is driven by individual student needs. And that's why tightening up that line to this level was very uncomfortable for us, because typically we may have 1 or 1.5 persons at this time of year that are not fully assigned for next year. Right now, every single person we have is fully assigned. That's not typically how we operate, because we always anticipate there may be another student, especially with the incoming kindergartners who you don't yet know during the course of the fall, one or more than one student may need some additional support. So I think this is a budget line where we're very, extremely kind of like hoping that it'll work for us. So just to keep our eye on that.
Maureen, if I may just jump
sure.
in there quickly. So process-wise, board, I mean, that is a very significant line to look at. And also, if you do the math, that is a point of savings for us relative to what I featured in terms of the bottom line. We went there in a group effort. It was not Maureen, Melissa, and I sit in a room. This was done very thoroughly and collectively with Laura, Sullivan, Tessa, Mariangela, and the building principals to sort this out. And quick story, I'll be fast. Many may know the Newton district in Massachusetts, the teachers went on strike. They broke the law to do that. And I was actually this weekend with one of those veteran teachers. The main reason they went on strike, they were up for contract, was the failure of Newton, as great a district as it is, to provide adequate teacher assistance and aides in the room. And so both the big picture I had and I had the individualized veteran teacher picture in front of me. This is a very significant place. The other thing we have to understand, which I think the board gets, is you budget by the individual within special education. It's a very different calculus. You budget by the individual. The rest of our budget is built more on groups, collective, multiple numbers. So any one child need, and that's why that moral, ethical, legal matters. That order is that morally, ethically, if a child has a need, we have to respond, and it's individually based. So at the last meeting, when I featured that 353 and said, well, that could shift on us, if a child emerges as a new child in the district for us who has an IEP-based need that requires some aid, we have to go there. So we're pleased where we got, very carefully. I want you as a board to know that. And we have to keep an eye on it, because the aids with teachers are very, very important to what we're able to do. Sorry, Marina, I just had to underscore those things.
I just wanted to highlight that because I think, again, when we were balancing the budget, we did because we did have some financial challenges, so we really tried to tighten up our staffing. As I keep looking at this particular budget line, this is the one that, again, just working here for as long as I have, this I've seen where we've reduced and had to add back. Every position we reduced and add back. So I think, as I mentioned, if there is any opportunity, even if there is any dollars come back from the state, or if it just happens and we have to figure it out, we'll have to either, shift or reduce other areas to make that work. But this is highly unusual for us to go into a year with such a tight staffing model in this area. And they are really essential staff because they also do help our, morning arrivals. We have an arrival. I mean, Amy, if she were here, she would explain to you how challenging it is to have the bus, the way we have our buses run, and having children dropped off 45 minutes before school requires us to have a certain amount of staffing there. When you have 400 students, some of which in September 4 years old and 5 years old, with adults, the only adults that are there are the aides. That's it. There's nobody, and Amy and John, of course, but I mean, they're the only people who care for these children at those times, at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. So even though for the most part, they're supporting one-to-one students, when they also do help support the rest of our school building too. So actually, the elementary school are extremely concerned about the tightness of that staffing model, because currently they would then still have to supervise with less people those mornings and afternoons with hundreds of students.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
We'll be up there.
So the equipment and textbook says 0.
Yep.
And
No, let's look. Yes, because what happened was that line should really be removed out of there. The textbooks for these students are really within the department, in the gen ed. Because if they need a modification, that would come out of a supply code, but they use for the most part, the same textbooks as their counterparts.
Okay, so the equipment and
Yep.
supplies are two separate things. Like
Yep.
equipment is machinery kind of.
Yeah, that could be, it could be the microphone, or what are those
Got
called?
it, got it.
For the classrooms.
Got it.
Yeah, FM systems and things like that, or for certain children, we're required to buy car seats and walkers and things like that for students that we transport. And each year, as the students get older, and they're custom, many of those pieces. So again, this is driven, as Bill said, on individual students. And if there's, if they require more, then we would provide that. But this is based on our understanding of our current students and what that, we may need to supply for them for next year. I just also want to draw your attention to under the tuition and related services line. So you will see a shift. So just I want to look, if you can see it, what we budgeted for this year. And then you can kind of see the actuals and you can see our projected, right? So as we look there, because there's some red there, and you'll see where I'm anticipating a reduction of tuition. Some of that is just, again, it's driven on individual students. So if we have students out of district that either graduate or other not out of district anymore, there'll be a shift in that line because that could represent maybe one student, that type of shift. But I also want to note that we had planned our tuition based upon certain students that we would have placed out of district. Many of them were subsequently placed out of district by their parents, but that, although we didn't pay it in the current school year, there will be a financial obligation later to pay for those students at one point. So I say that to say sometimes you may say, well, why did you plan for X and then it was only Y? Because we plan for it based upon our recommendation. But if there's if there's a difference in that placement, a parent, of course, has the opportunity and right to place their child where they would like to place them. But that's where sometimes you'll see, not so much as that we didn't, we're totally off in the planning, but rather what happened changed a bit. So, but that also being said, that line with settlements is the monies that either, in those years, if there is any reimbursement for those out-of-district placements that we have to pay back, is where we budget. For the board, I think everyone on the board is aware of this. I know the current board, because we've been taking money out of that reserve this year. We do currently have a settlement reserve set up. If we did not have that reserve, this line item would have to reflect $800,000 next year. So again, as we talk about our reserves, if that reserve runs out and we continue to have those expenses, they would need to be budgeted in this line item. So I mean, just to kind of, because there's different things that go on here that are not.
We'll, I think, start moving along through the rest of this, but it's important to zero in on the special ed because the children deserve the attention. But let me just underscore how important it is we have that reserve fund in Hastings, because it's public record that when I was leading Weston, we were suddenly about a $1.5 million in the hole because we weren't able to carry that sort of reserve fund in Connecticut. So then we were suddenly against a $50 million budget. Just you can get how serious that was. And we worked our way out of it. Very, very good move in terms of then what we led to. So there was a good end of the story, but that reserve ability and protecting it is very, very important. And again, this is public record. Every year we had to argue with the budget leaders, and it goes on in multiple Connecticut locations, why you need that money. It is, in a sense, a tax ahead on the residents. Let me be very clear. But what Maureen just said, we're saving money by having that money there. So we should probably keep moving here.
Yeah, only because I think, I didn't want to suggest that we don't have any settlements, but rather that money is now held in a reserve.
Yep.
And because we have the reserve, we didn't have to budget at the fund level. There's been times in the past that when we didn't have the reserve, that line reflected $500,000 to $700,000. So as long as we have the reserve, we wouldn't need to budget it as part of that spending plan. So it's important for us to keep our eye on that as I spoke about future budgets. Our reserve levels, that money runs out, that money has to now return to this, so just to be transparent on that. And again, you'll see our career and technical, as I mentioned, that program through BOE, and it's a wonderful program, and we do receive aid back. And also, I just want to note on our, not to keep belaboring this, but on the tuition, we also receive state aid back on some of the expenditures that we do have for our special. So although the costs are higher, the state does reimburse us for some of our special education expenses. So I just want to note that as well, that's also revenue that we receive back through our revenue budget. And just as a reminder, these are the high level, and I did put in the settlement line there, as well as the anticipated shifts in staffing. This is just an example. When we look at special ed, there's a line there, and it is contractual services. And just to give you a flavor for what that includes, and these are obligations. So this is beyond our internal staffing. These are other expenses that we anticipate we're going to have next year. And I think we've mentioned this earlier, that at any school, and you'll see Hudson Lab there, and I'll just pull that out because it's on the slide, that as school that operates in our district, if there are students there that have IEPs and have services necessary, we are required to provide those there at the school. And we contract out for those services. It's less expensive that way. Similar how we looked at our enrollments, this is our current projection, and next time I will have the 6 through 12, because I think there was a miscommunication with special ed myself. But just as you can see here, we're anticipating at the K-5 level, we currently are running 2 sections of ICT at each level. And you can see that we are projecting the same level next year. And again, much of these meetings have not occurred yet, so some of these numbers could shift in one direction or the other. But although 3rd grade next year, we're anticipating 9 students, having 9 in one ICT section would be too large. So we're still recommending keeping the second section there. Again, this is another area that's heavily regulated, and although the amount of students within our English language learners are relatively low as part of our percentage of our entire population, one students where, depending on their need and grade level, that even if new students arrive in our district, which actually happened this year for a short period of time, just with the arrival of those few students, we had to increase our staffing 0.6. So this is, again, very individualized service, actually more so, I think, than even special ed in terms of staffing. This requires a higher staffing ratio than even, in most cases, special ed. So currently, we have 3 full-time, we have 3.6 currently, but we're anticipating 3 teachers for next year for ELL. And that is to service around 20 to 23 students. But again, in an area in which that could shift very quickly. Instructional media, this is our media, our librarian, media specialist, instructional specialist, as well as staffing within the library, non-instructional staffing, and we are anticipating a reduction in some of that staffing there. So that's where you'll see, again, the reduction, and we've talked about the various reductions we've made through this budget. Oops, did I skip that slide on the list? Okay, instructional technology. So this is really covers both what happens in classrooms, outside of classrooms. This is all of our spending in the area of technology. As far as salaries, that includes our in-house, some of our in-house tech people. It includes our data coordinator, which is become extremely, all districts have the amount of data we have to report out is unbelievable. And as well as our CIO, this actually includes a lot of different staffing members, but like parts of them, so people who help support the website and all the rest. So this is all in for all of the folks that make up that category. And again, we spoke about BOCES earlier. We contract them, and they are running most of our network. They provide the day-to-day support. We are anticipating a reduction, although you can't see it necessarily baked in these numbers, but had we kept the same staffing level as we currently have in our technology department, and that's really to help students and the teachers. I have the help desk on my computer, and I monitor it, and they are up there with the nurse's office in terms of calls each day. I mean, they're getting upward of 50, if not 100 incidents a day that they're resolving. So this is another one that I think is going to be quite painful, because currently we have a staffing level, especially with our elementary students, if they get locked out, which, I mean, kids every day, they forget their Chromebook, they charge it. I mean, there's so many things that occur that we're able to really provide a very high level of service. But again, as we look to tighten up the areas that we could, we did make a reduction in this area too, in terms of support staff. So that is the only change here. And then other expenses that were softwares that, like Star Renaissance and some of those other screeners that were previously paid for through the COVID monies are now incorporated in this budget. So that accounts for the increase there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, just keep in mind all those BOCES expenses, and you can see they total over $1 million, we do receive back $500,000 on that expenditure. So it is still quite a bargain for, because if we had to run this ourselves, it would cost us a lot more. And here there is just some examples of some of our instructional technology software and hardware. These are all reviewed each year. Melissa reviews them with all the teachers. We see where it's being used, how much it's being used, what the impact is, and all the rest. So each year we assess what we want to renew or do not want to renew. School counseling, this budget area is for our, 4, 6, 7 guidance counselors and our 2 social workers. We are anticipating a retirement in there, and that's why you'll see that reduction. It's not so much a reduction in staffing, rather when a senior staff member retires and the replacement is hired, you're getting some savings in that salary category. So we are anticipating about a $30,000 savings in salaries there. Health, this is the staffing for our nurse's office. We currently have 2 full-time RNs at this building and 1.5 RNs at Hillside School. In addition to that, we have 2 full-time clerical members that work in both of those offices, as well as a contract for our medical, a doctor that helps us, we're required to have it, and helps guide us in some decision-making and oversight. In addition to that, you'll see here it says health services other districts. Again, this is a legal requirement when we have children that attend private schools, whether special ed or private or Catholic in other districts. They are required to provide a nurse to those buildings, and then we're billed back a portion of that based on a legal formula. So each year that's about $50,000 to sometimes $60,000, depending on how many students are out of district. But this, again, is an expense that is required to be budgeted in this category. And I will say that with the nurse's office during COVID, we did have additional nurses. And I will say that we are, although you don't see anything in this budget line item, we no longer are, that funding ran out this year. So we're actually, although you can't see it, we are going to have a reduction in our nursing staff because during COVID, we were able to increase it by another, say like 0.4, 0.6 that was supporting us across the buildings. And as we see more children with medical needs, many students are monitored one-on-one on iPads throughout the day. So although there's no increase here, it's in fact a decrease from what we currently have. So we're, again, it's just an area that we have to watch because we are seeing much more medically fragile students as well as staff members who at times they're helping when there's an emergency in the building as well. Psychologists, this is for, I think we have 6 school psychologists this year, largely supporting special ed, although some do provide some building level services. Co-curricular. This includes all of our clubs, all of our theater, events, chaperoning. As you can see here, there's a continued commitment there to fund these opportunities for students. Next time I'll provide you some details on the number of students that are participating. I wasn't unable to get all those numbers together for this evening, but each year we've expanded and added different clubs as things have either students have shown interest in different areas. Just some example of that would be the debate team, the chess club, affinity groups and things such as that. At Hillside, they have that safety patrol and different opportunities for them as well. And some of the music also offerings that are outside of the school day, teachers receive stipends to run those things. So that's also reflected in these lines as well. And again, the increase is really just to reflect like the increases in the contract for those people. Contract services, this is for things such as like when they have like the Latin dance at the school for the 5th grade and some cultural arts opportunities. That's money that's also budgeted in this area of the budget. And then the remainder are just really class trips and some theater expenses. And this area is slated to go up about $60,000 next year. And the majority of it is being driven by actually the current cost in the theater budget. So the theater budgets this year they actually had gone up quite a bit from the previous year, but in addition, we've had to increase in about another $12,000 in this year's spending. So it's really just reflecting what we're spending this year to the cost of the shows going up. Okay, and then athletics. So this is for the athletic director, all the coaches in the district. You may remember that last year we were able to add a full-time sports trainer, and that's, worked out, and that's reflected here again, that is continuing with that. There's also a support person that works in that office, and then the remainder of things are either driven by league fees, supervision. The last line item there, and again, hopefully this is enough money. We've seen a large increase in the officiating sports, and that's for referees. And I know for many years they didn't receive an increase, and a few years back they were unable to attract people to it, so they got a significant increase. And you can see the cost of that we pay is about $93,000 next year, we anticipate. And we are, again, anticipating an increase in our interscholastic budget, about $35,000. And as you can see, with the adds and the deletes, our instructional portion of our budget is slated to go up about $1 million next year. This is just some details that I did receive for the athletic department highlights, and I broke it down by season, and this is for our students 7 through 12. We did not yet have the spring numbers for modified, so I wasn't able to include those. But again, just to give you a sense of the amount of students the interscholastic sports supports or who participate in interscholastic sports. So we have really huge numbers there. And again, this year we ran 55 teams, which is quite incredible. Like compared to districts that are larger than us, do not run 55 teams. So again, we have a big commitment. As stated earlier, when I was showing the comparisons, our co-curricular, which includes theater and all the clubs and the sports, we are outspending as a portion of our budget most of our counterparts in the region.
How many per team?
Well,
Depends on the sport.
Yeah, it depends on the
yeah,
sport.
I think the only,
varies.
yeah.
I'm just wondering, when it says 435, it's not summative, right? It's just depends on the number that I enrolled. It's not summative. It's not like the 270.
Yeah, I mean, there's more fall sports just as there's more offerings in the fall, there's less offerings in the winter. And some of the winter sports like basketball have less participants. The track teams in particular have a lot of
So
students
that's a
in
total
them.
number, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's all.
Sorry, yes. But again, those numbers, even when I look at them, I'm like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of participation for our sports teams. So again, we are continuing the funding for that. And, we went over last budget presentation. There is also a part of our transportation budget that's dedicated. That's about almost $200,000 of sports transportation in addition to our interscholastic budget.
Yep.
And there's other areas of the budget that support these things, such as like our security and things that are budgeted elsewhere, that there's additional expenses because of, things that occur here in the evening and sports and field maintenance and all the rest that are also required that don't necessarily show up in those areas, but are like this year, the facilities department had to make some repairs in the theater. So there are things that sometimes don't show up in that particular area that are expenses elsewhere for towards those programs. So I think that's that was it for this portion of the budget tonight, just to kind of give you an overview of that, and we'll get into more detail at a future meeting. God bless you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you. Can open up for any questions or comments?
I have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
Actually, you know what?
Oh.
It just occurred to me, I think we're gonna, because we moved public comment and they've been waiting so patiently, it's okay, I'm gonna move to public comment and then we'll come back for
Okay.
comments about the budget. Is that okay?
That's fine.
So thank you very much for being patient with us. I'm going to open up for public comment. You just come to the mic. Melissa, do you have a list or? Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Andy Zimmerman. Um, well, I'm back to talk about the music some more. You know, I have some figures here. Would sure like to get some more figures. Hopefully we will get those, and hopefully the board will ask for them. First of all, the 0.6, I just want to say again, it's 1.0 over 2 years. It was cut 0.4 last year. This year, 0.6. That adds up to a whole teacher position. So we're going down from 6 to 5, just so everybody is aware of what's actually going on here. Yeah. One thing that has been lost already, I don't know if people are aware of this, until like a couple of years ago, there was music classes in the middle school. Now there are none. There used to be in 5th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade general music classes. That's all been already zeroed out. That's one way that the teacher elimination is being accomplished here. And that's something that I don't know if that's even been discussed here. And it's against New York State regulations, which require there to be general music education. Wouldn't it be sad if somebody were to sue to force the district to comply with that? It would be pretty embarrassing, I would think. We'll see, right? Now, I just want to compare the teacher numbers to some neighboring districts, which are all about the same size as ours. The proposal on the table here is to cut from 6 to 5 teachers here in Hastings. Dobbs has 7, Irvington 8, Ardsley 9, Bronxville 6, Mount Pleasant 7, Edgemont 7, Pleasantville 6, Croton 8, Briarcliff 8. Nobody has 5. And if you do the math, you'll find out that we would have way more kids per teacher than any of those other districts that are similar to us and that are nearby. Now, if no sections are being eliminated, and I'm just going to assume that our teachers were not massively underscheduled before, but again, without the hard numbers, it's hard to know. What's happening is there's way more music students than there, as far as I know, ever have been before. And you have these ensembles that are huge. You have, you know, like 50, 60, 70, maybe 80 or 90, I'm not sure, but these huge music ensembles. And so the teachers are being asked to supervise effectively classes that are 2, 3, or even more times as large as a regular class, and that's how this is being done. I hope that the board will ask for more firm numbers over how many kids are in each ensemble, and yeah, and in the lessons also. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm Risa Kaufman. I'm at 121 Euclid Avenue, and I'm also a member of the Alliance for the Music Program, or AMP. So first, I really want to note my appreciation for all of the work and thought that's gone into developing the budget. I know there are lots of competing considerations, and they all have to be balanced and accounted for. This presentation has been very helpful. And without wanting or intending to pit any one program or any one department against another, and also fully recognizing all of the limitations that you've outlined this evening, I nevertheless do want to voice my concern about the proposed elimination of the teaching position in the music department. I understand the teaching position is being phased out because of teacher retirement, and the music faculty have figured out a way to cover the required teaching schedule. But I do want to register my disappointment and my frustration that the district is choosing the narrow path here, expecting that our excellent music faculty will make do with the minimum, and rather than supporting their ability and their desire to do more for our kids. Every few years, the district does propose to cut a music position from the budget, and every time it does so, parents raise significant concern with the proposal alongside genuine appreciation for the district's excellent music program, consistent with Hastings' reputation for supporting the arts. So our music faculty are true professionals who care deeply about their students and their responsibilities to the district. I have no doubt that they're going to make the budget cut work because they have to, and we continually expect them to do more with less. Student interest in band, orchestra, chorus are growing, and as Andy mentioned, some ensembles are bursting at the seams, particularly where the grades are being combined. We should be celebrating and nurturing this interest. Music education is critical to so many aspects of students' learning and development, social and emotional health, community building, and their engagement with the larger world around them. Over time, our music program is diminishing as our faculty are stretched to capacity and our own expectations for what's possible are shrinking. So with all of this in mind, I do encourage the administration to reconsider the proposed budget. By fully staffing the department, we'll ensure the quality of the district's excellent music program and support our music faculty to develop and implement a rich and a creative curriculum for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you. All right. Oh yeah, thank you too for being patient. We're going to move on to student reports.
Did you wanna-
Wait, I had some questions.
Oh, I'm
about
sorry.
the budget.
I'm like,
Yeah, we just went out for public comment, come back now and,
yeah, my bad. I'm sorry.
that's all right.
Sorry.
I'm your wingman, Alex, so it's okay.
I appreciate that.
Um,
So, second
I have,
back.
okay,
Go ahead.
I just have a list of questions. Hopefully they'll be not so long, but I just have a question, by slide. So slide 14.
Okay.
I'm just curious how it says Hastings ranks 1 out of 48 in instructional spending as a percentage of total budget, but then it also says Hastings ranks 18th out of 52 districts in total teacher salary. I know you sort of talked about that at the beginning. I didn't really understand. So does that mean that, I'm assuming instructional spending is more than teacher salary? Is that what the reason is?
Well, it is, but also it can be that although they don't get paid as much, we have more FTEs, right? So I think, as an example, in total, right? Like what I had kind of mentioned earlier, we have some staffing models and special, as an example, special education's included that. So although our teachers may not, their contract, what they actually make and the way they determine that is looking, if you were at each district, with everything being the same, over a 20-year career, who would make the most? That's how they determine the contract. So that's one measure. But when they say instructional spending, that really speaks to, we do, as a total, have more teachers for, it's the spending on actual, individuals. And not so much as what they make individually, that's what that other one is speaking about. Like, if it's just looking strictly at what they would be compensated. But if you have more teachers, you're going to be spending more in instructional spending. There are other things in
Wait,
there.
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
So
All right.
instructional
So
spending.
instructional spending is more than just salary?
Yeah, well,
Well, it's the number of people would drive that
So-
too, not just what they get paid.
Basically, it's saying out of your total budget, what percent is spent on instruction, which includes salaries and other things, but there are two different measures at work here. One's a ranking. So the third bullet, the 18th out of 50, that's a ranking only looking at teacher salaries. Whereas the other is saying of a proportion of an entire budget, how much is spent on instruction.
I see.
So in.
I see. I get it. It's clear.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No,
I'm sure
it's actually.
I'm sure it's pretty clear for everybody.
Well,
I
but
understand
no, it's
now.
good you reiterate it, because in School Budget 101, they tell superintendents to make sure you have the first rank in instructional spending. If you care about students, you care about doing really well on that first
Got it.
thing. The budget hawks would be actually not unhappy, and I'm not saying I agree with the 18th out of
Right.
52, but they would say, how much can you get for as little dollar,
Got it.
right? I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating we should, highest percent we can on instruction.
Perfect. Got
But-
it. Thank you so
But
much.
I think what it does speak to is that the majority of our spending is in people, across all areas. I can tell you, and I'm not, with, of course, department, our actual number of staff members is larger per student than in a lot of other districts. And that's what pushes that number, head count.
Okay, thanks. All right, so moving on to side 33, about the music staffing. So I think you all know that I'm very passionate about the music program for very personal reasons and also because I think it's important for our students. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this, because I understand where the letters have been coming from, and I want to be clear. So when I look at slide 33 and I see the music staffing and everything that is listed, what people do, is that my understanding is, based on what you're saying, is that this is the same as what we have currently, right?
Same program, not
The
the
same,
staffing
correct,
to
the same
match.
programs. So none of these, all of these programs existed last year, exist currently,
Now,
and
currently.
will exist next year.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to make sure I know that.
Get the mic.
And that, including the theory and the music theory classes and the recording technology, all that currently exists and will exist next year. We're not cutting any classes either.
Correct.
Got it, okay. At that, given the opportunity, so you spoke to Mr. Carini and you showed him the budget. You didn't show it to him. He came up with the plan. So they're fully on board. I just want to understand, they're fully on board with this plan.
He shared a couple of options that would allow us to maintain our current programming. And then we met with the administrators and we talked about the best option, centering children, and also thinking about, just transition time, scheduling, et cetera. And those were the conversations around teachers, who's teaching what, who's more comfortable teaching what. Yes.
Got it, okay. And then I know that, like, to the band, I can't remember if it was this year or last year, that there was a lot of kids. It was either in 5th grade, 6th grade. One of them had like 50 kids in it, which is great. A little difficult probably for the teachers to organize, but I just want to make sure that this is set in stone for this year. But Nick, if we find that this isn't working, we can always, or if there are more kids enrolled, we can always next year go back to the budget and figure out how to increase the number of people.
Yeah, midstream, it's always very difficult.
Midstream, I
to-
understand
yeah,
difficult, but like
yeah.
we can
And-
see.
And let me put a little color on that, because these are wonderful professionals, and the record shows I'm in the audience a lot. So I care deeply about what they're doing. That's a sincere comment. Nobody's in love with this. They are professionals saying they understand the budget realities, they understand where we are, and they're gonna maximize it. For the existing work next year will be the existing work. They all will be working not beyond contract, to their contract. And the dedication will show up as we've heard tonight, the dedication will show up for our children. But we're gonna watch it very, very closely going forward. I'm in the audience enough to know we have very full ensembles. I see that. We have a packed house when our 5th and 6th graders went to perform this winter. So I understand what's happening here. So I just want to be clear, Melissa's worked very personally and carefully with particularly John here as the leader of this group. To say that anyone would be in love with it, no, we're trying to optimize what we can here in a difficult budget situation, and now as we look out a number of years. And as you've seen across the budget, there are other places where we've had to take some serious, even more serious potential shifts.
Okay, wait,
So-
can I just ask one more
Before
question?
you move on from the music
I'm not, yeah, I
part,
just have one more question about the
On
music part.
music, okay,
Yeah,
good.
one last thing. And I thought jazz band was Schedule B. Is jazz band?
Yes, it is a Schedule B. There were questions about it, so I added it to the
Okay,
slide, I believe.
right, so it's not part of
It's
his
above and
instructional
beyond.
spending,
So
right?
that,
It's,
Doreen, that's
yeah.
actually a
Correct.
great catch,
Yeah,
because
thank
there is
you.
work here that teachers rightly so are paid for that time beyond, and
Yeah,
that's one of those.
exactly, so
thank
I
you.
just
That's
wanted to
a good-
understand, okay.
We
Yeah,
should
that's a
probably
good
update
catch.
that for
That is
future.
above, and that is just making sure that visually people are seeing jazz band is still being offered, our program is intact. and
Yeah.
Who's teaching it?
Right,
And we can
Our
probably
staffing.
modify in the future which is Schedule B, which is in the core assignment,
Yeah.
great,
just so it's clear.
okay, thanks. I'm moving on from that, if you have
The
any
music,
questions.
So I just have a more technical question based on what we heard. Sorry, thank you. Yeah. So is there a requirement for general music to be offered
So,
across board, including the middle school?
so I want to,
And if
and
so,
I will
where do you-
outline
Okay,
this
make sure you're in the
once.
mic, Melissa.
Yeah, I will outline this more specifically. This was raised to me as a potential question / concern. I double-checked myself, and then I went to the Commissioner's Regulations, 100.4. I can send the link to the board. So the requirement for units of study is in grade 7 and 8, and it's the arts, including a half unit of study in the visual arts and a half unit of study in music. And
What's a half unit of study?
right, so it defines it, and I'm going to just scroll down here, that basically as long as, I'm not seeing it in the scroll, hold on a moment. It's, it can be through band, it could be through orchestra, it could be through chorus, that is accepted as one of the half unit options.
Okay. Can I,
I'll send the link to the
Okay.
Commissioner's Regulations, just so that everyone has it.
so are we fulfilling that with our kids?
We're in compliance with our
Okay.
program.
Okay.
We're well over what we need to be offering.
Okay. Okay, slide 34. I just have a quick random question. The Race Matters Committee, I'm curious why it's here. Isn't that a Schedule B? Or is it is a Schedule B, but it just gets put in here? Slide 34.
So, no, that's just, there's money for that committee and what they'll bring in speakers, and it's used for the diverse book fair and other.
So it's not Schedule B?
It
Or
is,
Schedule
no,
B?
it's actually, no, it's not, it's,
Schedule B is-
that money is not paying anyone on our staff. It's a budgeted line item that they work together to prioritize different offerings for students, assemblies,
Ah.
and other things.
For programming money.
Yeah.
Okay,
Program.
As
perfect.
opposed to personnel money.
Got it.
And is it just centered strictly on race?
No,
or
no,
other things?
that was not paying for Center Lane at all, that,
No, she
No,
said it
no.
wasn't
Oh, no.
centered on.
oh,
race.
centered, oh, I heard Center
Yeah,
Lane,
no, I
sorry.
No.
I'm sorry.
Is it strictly just on race?
Yes.
Nothing else, nothing more?
Well, the committee.
Because I've seen
yeah, the
other
co-
things, that's
Yeah,
what
the
I'm
commi-
asking.
no, right, it's a good,
Because
substantively, and I sit in on most of those committee meetings, and there has been a little discussion that historically has been the name, and it's a very important committee. They have had some consideration of broadening the name because it's really looks at a range of
it doesn't-
diversity.
exactly.
It looks at all aspects of, as later we're going to talk a bit about the diversity and equity inclusion. I think they're a very important graphic that we're going to increasingly use across the board. That
Because a
it's-
lot of people have assumed, and this predates Dr. Marquez.
It's
with
about a
this line
10-year-old
item.
committee,
Yeah.
and
And it's not just doing race, so
Yeah.
we all know that. So I don't want people to
yeah,
assume
and
that.
it's established by some of our most wonderful teachers who stay deeply involved in it, and still actively is the name. This year, there's been a little consideration of whether, in a future year, to modify the name, so to show that it's all matters of diversity.
Okay, slide 40. I just want to understand, you had said in the notes section that it's a reduction of 4 to 5 teacher aides, but when I look at line 2, it says teacher's assistants line goes up. Are teacher's assistants and teacher's aides two different things?
Yeah, they are.
Sorry for my, okay, ignorance. Okay, thank you.
All good questions.
Then slide 46, the English language learners. So you had said that we are unable to reduce staffing, but then I thought you said that we're going from 3.6 to 3.
Well, what would happen, we started the year with 3, I think I was, and then during the course of this year, there was, there were some new students that moved into district ended up not staying the entire year. We increased the staffing, but I think it's just to speak to that I've seen that occur before, so then 1 or 2 students in either direction can make you increase staff, but even losing a few doesn't really allow to decrease staff either. So I think what I was saying was we started with 3, currently we're employing 3.6, but those students are now leaving. So we've had students who, because of things that are going on in the world, that have been with us for some period of time and they do not speak English. So we've had to increase our staffing, but they're not going to be with us next year.
So people come into the district and they're English language learners, right? I imagine that number must change every year, just because I mean, are we working towards making sure that these kids can, like, graduate out of the English language learner program so that they're proficient and they can join? Or
Yes.
maybe they're already in regular ed, but, you know, that they're,
We do very well
to
with
speed.
moving students forward. There's an English proficiency test that students take, and depending on their language proficiency, they are legally entitled to a certain number of mandated minutes, and it really depends on what their need is. And so, to Maureen's point, that number could change quickly, I heard you say when you were presenting that slide, and that's because if we have someone move into the district or move out of the district, that's in flux. And in this case, we definitely want to make sure that we're moving students towards proficiency, but those requirements are very, very strict.
oh, okay. But that is the goal, to
Yeah.
get the kids.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Language numbers.
Okay, slide 50. The COVID technology, that gives me like shivers every time. Do we have to keep that line in? It's been 0 for a couple
Oh,
of
yeah, I'll
years
get
now.
rid of it, sorry.
Thank you.
You know what happens, sometimes when there's, like, once it drops off, if there's any detail from, like, previous
Right,
years.
I
it
get it.
kind
I
of-
was like,
yeah.
it's 0 this year, it's 0 next
Yeah, no, I
this
can
year.
get
I don't
rid
want
of
to see
it.
it
Yes,
again.
that's fine.
Okay. Slide 51, random
Mhm.
question.
Yeah.
Zoom, why are we looking at Zoom when we use Google?
We do have a Zoom
We
license,
do
so.
have a Zoom license. We're actually looking at eliminating some of these. We do a request for service every single year, but there, you can go on our Hastings website, under the technology link. All of our approved technology applications are there. Certain things are attached to textbooks, other things are attached to differentiated support, certain things are attached to having Google Meets or Zooms, you know, just being able to be present if we're doing, you know, earlier this year we did the, we worked with Brown versus the Board of Education historic site, and that we did through a Zoom webinar. So there are things that we
I
use
see.
You need it for the webinar.
Got it.
That's what I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
Okay. Slide 53,
Mhm.
school counseling.
Yep.
Is it, I noticed that it just says instructional salaries, but the school counselors, do they technically instruct, or that's just the title that we use?
It's because
Just a
they're
title.
professional salaries, and that's what the
Got it.
state, yeah.
Okay. And then if we look at slide 48, no. Sorry, not 48. Slide 55.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we go to the school psychologists.
Yep.
I guess I don't really know the difference between what the counselors do and the psychologists do, but I don't want to have to get into that here, so maybe I'll.
Well, I would say that
Get a
the
little-
psychologists in district largely support our special education students, because much of what they do is testing and mandated services. And I had mentioned earlier that there's a small portion that may be used for like building-based services like MTSS.
Yeah.
But the majority of the psychologists in this category, but again, these are grouped based upon how we have to report them to the state. They're like expense codes is how we break them down. That 2820 by the state means psychologists for us in school districts. So the majority of those folks do work to support the special ed. And then the school counselors, that's for the most part, it's the 4 guidance counselors at the high school.
Got it.
and the 2, yeah.
Okay.
How many
I
And then
understand.
there are 2 social workers there that provide both special education as well as building-based services for MTSS.
Got
How
it.
many psychologists do we have?
6.
6 of them. 2 in each building, or just they work all
Well, there's
over?
some that are considered district-wide. There is one in the middle, one at the high school, no, 2 at the high school, and then there are some that are considered district-wide.
And they are
although
all-
they may be housed in different buildings, huh?
And they are all just special ed, or the whole?
The majority of them support the special education students, because much of it is mandated on children's IEP that they have a certain amount of.
So do they fall under the special ed budget?
No.
Or-
We're required to, the only other practitioners that are in that special ed, I don't know if that is the right word, but would be like the speech and language people, they're
OT
budgeted
and
for
all those
in the special ed budget. Psychologists, because they do educational testing, so, but I'm saying the majority of hours are there to support special education.
So in terms of work, they seem to be supporting special ed, but they are there for the whole student body.
Yeah, they have a gen ed sped blend. Some days it may be more gen ed. They do often lead some of the special ed meetings, but their testing abilities, and Jody can speak to this, would be across all students who may need some assessment and testing. And what's important here to know is we have the two social workers. We have one retiring. We have posted for a blend, social worker, psychologist. That's to see who arrives to be the best candidate. And key in there is who's going to have the availability to students. There's a back and forth right now all over the place, not just here amongst administrators, as to whether you want a psychologist or you want a social worker. The social worker advantage is you may not have the same obligations as to testing and other places. You may actually have more student-facing time. That's a bit of an open discussion.
And the
But-
drug and alcohol
but,
counseling. the
Yeah,
social
but
workers.
let me compliment Hastings for having, in 3 buildings, this degree of mental health support for our students. Many districts don't have it to this degree, and this is really important.
And to answer your question, I would say it's more about the person's experience, what our needs are, and what experience they bring, whether they're a psychologist or a social worker. But typically, school psychologists are very focused on assessment.
Got it. Okay, slide 57. I'm almost at the end. This co-curricular is like all mostly Schedule B stuff, and this is where it goes. That's
Yes.
why there's so why is there a difference between co-curricular salaries and then other random things that are pulled out? Like, wouldn't Hastings Theater and wouldn't all the theater?
So all the theater stipends are in the co-curricular stipends. This is for things that they purchase for the theater, like set, yes.
I see. Okay.
Outside.
And
of-
then the class trips,
Mhm.
parents are always asked to pay for those, so
Yes, so we have to budget the expense, but we also budget a revenue. We on a revenue
Oh,
side of the
so you
budget, we
get
have the
the-
money coming in. So it's really flat, but we have to show for it here.
I understood.
And there
Okay.
are some school trips the district does in fact pay for.
Okay. I'm a big fan of class trips, big fan.
Mm-hmm.
So feel free to increase that. I'm not speaking for everybody, just myself. Um,
Oh, that's right.
And then that's it. And I'm happy to see the athletic department highlights. It all seems good too. And then I was a little confused about the modified numbers, but now I get it. The modified numbers are the 7th and 8th grade, and that's why you only have 9 to 12 here. So,
Yes,
Okay.
because that starts after break. and
Got
I
it.
don't think they're the final number.
perfect. Okay, thanks so much.
Welcome.
Just for a quick moment, because Eliana, this is the traditional time we look and go. We'll come back for other comments. I just want to get Eliana here before it gets too late. So I know it's a hard segue to come out of the budget discussion, but.
Thank you. I first want to note that the jazz band was mentioned earlier, and just to point out some other courses that are taught by music teachers outside of the school day. The high school madrigals, the middle school select tones, the high school steel drums band, and all of the music independent studies. And those independent studies meet before the school day, and students still get credit for them. Okay, now on to my report.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm solo tonight because Kai is actually upstairs in Tech Week for BTC's production of A New Brain, which goes up this weekend. So come check that out, Broadway Training Center. They're performing in the high school theater. Now to do some other musical updates. The high school musical Urinetown, directed by Lori Walton, is coming up to their last few weeks of rehearsal. I can say it has been a very productive and exciting rehearsal process, and the show is very quickly approaching. Performances are Friday, April 12th, and Saturday the 13th at 7 p.m., and Sunday the 14th at 2 p.m. It will be an amazingly funny show, so come support.
What is that appropriate for? What ages? Like,
So when the high school did it before, I think I was in 4th grade, and I watched it. I think it's appropriate for younger audiences. I think jokes that may not be would just fly over their heads.
got it.
It's very much like physical comedy.
Perfect. Looking forward.
Yeah, exciting.
Very special announcement. Tomorrow, classes are cut short in the morning because the Alvin Ailey Dance Company is coming to perform an assembly for us. So excited for that. Special thanks to Ms. Walters and Mr. Abrams for helping organize that for the whole school. This is the regular decision season for us seniors. So within the next 2 weeks, students will have heard back from the majority of their colleges. So let's all send positive vibes to all the patiently awaiting seniors like myself. Other senior news, senior superlatives came out this past week. Seniors got to vote for their peers in a wide variety of categories, everything from most likely to be president, from most likely to win a Grammy. The winning students took photos for the yearbook at the end of last week. For some GSA updates, last Wednesday, March 13th, members of the high school and middle school GSAs went on a trip and attended PrideWorks. PrideWorks is an annual conference held for LGBTQIA youth, their allies, and the adults in their lives. After speeches from keynote speakers and a catered lunch, students were able to take courses that they pre-selected. I personally attended one about queer positive Christian and Jewish scriptures. That was absolutely amazing. And the conference was so fun. So thanks to Mr. Lopez, the advisor of the high school GSA, for helping organize that. This past Friday, March 15th, and Saturday, March 16th, was the 5th grade production of Mary Poppins Jr. The show was an absolute success with a full audience of supportive friends and families. Congrats to the cast and crew, and huge congrats to Mr. Riss for a wonderful production. That also adds on to one of those extra music things. Some of the music teachers do some of the musicals. Olympics, I talked a lot about the Olympics last meeting, but here's a little quick update because it was literally an incredible day. The word is that we've never seen more spirit in the school before this day. Yeah. People running through the hallways, dressed in their grade colors, cheering, music blasting, and without any bias, the seniors did win the Olympics. So kind of a big deal. Huge thanks to everyone involved in that as well. For sports, very quickly, just want to say that all spring sports started last week, with each team's first game being either this or next week. We're excited for a great spring season. As Dr. McCursey said earlier, break is only a few days away, and students are very excited to enjoy some hopefully sunny weather and as we move into the spring season. And I want to end the report tonight by thanking you all for giving some further details into the instructional aspects of the budget. But I also want to say that it is me and Kai's responsibility as liaisons to express to you what we hear from the students throughout the building, because that's exactly our job, to tell you what we hear. And although it was elaborated on tonight, I still want to express that a significant number of students have come to me outraged and angered by the lack of fulfillment of Mr. Rubino's music department position because of the proposed budget. And I will now voice a number of the concerns raised with me from the student body. Students feel that HHS thrives on students' ability to have one-on-one connections and learning opportunities with their teachers, which often falls outside of fully mapped out schedules. And this connection is one of the reasons which makes our music department so successful. Students worry not only of less opportunities for small groups and individualized instructions, although that was discussed tonight, but they also heavily worry about the workload of their teachers as classes do get redistributed. And this connection to teachers and individualized structure, as I said, not only falls in pre-planned lessons, but also just in seeking out teachers for casual music guidance throughout the day, not just in the scheduled after school time. Many students understand that there will be no change to the variety of courses offered at the high school, but find it hard to hear that there will be no change whatsoever in the classroom and with the quality of production, as we have right now an extremely successful music department with the full amount of positions as it stands. And this success in the high school can be seen in the previous Hershey Park competition we had, where the choir, band, and orchestra all walked away with awards, some of which being those first place awards. And although this success at Hershey is representative of the high school, students believe that the appreciation, development, and growth in music start in those younger grades, of which Mr. Rubino's position mainly focused. Students worry that such change in the music program represents a reduced commitment by the district to music education, and worry that the redistribution of music classes will lessen the possibilities of future expansions in the music program to meet changing needs. And finally, students have voiced that music is one of the main parts of a well-rounded education, and that such loss of a position could negatively impact us all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eliana.
Free to leave.
I just want to say something, Eliana, that you know that, that's not it. That Doug Friedman, who teaches in the elementary school, went to Hastings schools.
I do.
And he had Mr. Rubino, and it makes me feel good that he can fill those shoes a little bit and know what that experience is like for kids. So however this ends up, I feel like that just is a very warm thought.
I love Mr. Rubino. He's one of those teachers that anyone can just go to see basically any time of the day. Just pop in, say hi. It's one of those connections that we really thrive on at this school, especially in the music department.
I think it's important to note what Eliana said, and we don't have to address it now, but that the children, whether it's true, whether it will be true or not, that the question, what you said was that they're worried about the quality of the teaching and the quality of the work. And I think that's something that we need to keep our eye on to make sure that, the plan, from what I understand from the plan, that won't happen, but I understand the children's fear that we have the program, but it won't be the quality program that they're looking for. So that's an important thing to note that the children are thinking, that we should make sure that we think about and address as we move forward.
And I want to say that's in terms of the number of teachers, not in the teachers themselves, because
No, I know what you
Yeah.
meant. I knew what you meant. No problem.
we love our teachers.
I
They are
did not think
amazing.
they were checking the quality of the teachers.
And
No, no, no.
let me compliment Ileana, because she knows how organizations work. We meet all the time. We met today, and you said, should I share? I said, yes. And I can tell you, some supers would have said no, but I said yes, because I know superintendents. And it's really important you share it. I knew you would do it respectfully. I knew you would do it in an open, honest way. And I also offered, and I did check with Dr. Szymanski, very willing to meet with groups of students to work through the questions, to understand what's a Schedule B and what might be covering, what's not, and then what this means. Because I'm very serious about working through this in a way that keeps us moving at such a high level in music. But I want to compliment you for doing a difficult thing. And I think that's why today you asked me, hey, should I share or not? And I said, that's your role, and we respect it, and I know you do it respectfully, even as direct as it may be, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just really want to echo that, because that has been, Hastings is small, it's a bonded community. What is in here is already out. So, but I also want to thank Dr. Makesi for that kind of leadership, because I know the three of us run on transparency, and I like the fact that I could see you are actually personally, you spoke highly of it, added more things that are happening musically that wasn't even mentioned. So you brought the voice of people that may not represent yours. And I really want to applaud you for such leadership. It's very important. And thank you for doing that. Thank you. I really appreciate it. All of us do, actually. Yeah.
And I'd just like to make sure that all those things that Eliana listed that are Schedule B music, that they're all continuing as well, as we talked about with jazz band, but we can have the list of everything that all the Schedule Bs, all those other
funded,
extra, the steel band and everything. Okay. Thanks,
Thank you,
Eliana.
Have a good night. Have a good night. So we're going to return. If there are any other comments or questions regarding Maureen's budget presentation.
I had a quick, hi, so good to see you.
Hey, Sharon.
I had a question, a clarifying question that I got some info about. Maureen, yes, sorry, did you say that we have to pay for students that go to other districts if they are not special ed?
Well,
charter
I had
schools.
just mentioned,
charter
yeah, only because I thought maybe that may stand out to some people as they go through the materials, because that's not a typical line
checking,
item.
just
Yeah,
clear.
so,
And they don't have
again,
to be
very
special
highly
ed.
unusual, but it is a requirement if someone selects that for their child, that we would
At a
have
public
to pay for.
school, we don't have to pay if they go to.
Well, unless it's, unless it's
It's-
a placement from our special ed team.
Got it.
Or ELL, we've had students placed out of other districts that
But
have.
what about gen
programs.
ed students?
No, not that I can think of.
Public schools?
To public schools?
Only if
no,
they went,
but
only if only if they've lost their permanent housing while they lived in Hastings, and then they'd be covered by McKinney-Vento. And then we have had that situation where if for some reason they moved out of district lived elsewhere, that district would charge us the tuition for providing the education to that student while they're temporarily displaced. And what that really means is if you lost housing, it could even be you lost your housing here, you live in another district with, say, your parents, but it's not your home, that's considered under New York State law homelessness. And by that measure, that school district, and we've had that, would, if the student wanted to come here, we'd have to send a bus. If they want to attend the district in which now they live, that district bills us the tuition for that child.
Okay.
So that's the only gen ed scenario, but it does happen from time to time.
Needs a bilingual program.
Yeah.
Got it. I just wanted to, I got an information about that I wanted to clarify.
Any other questions or comments about the budget? No? Moving on to the update and district highlights. These are posted in board docs. Is there anything that you were wishing to pull out from here?
Just a reminder, the front end reminder about our inclement weather give back plan. Actually, Ileana asked me today, are we off on April 1? I said, I wish I could say yes, but I'm saying no. So it's May 24th, May 28th, and June 26th, but I'll keep sending that back out. So when I get someone so informed asking me, I know I got to keep clarifying and letting people know.
All right.
So the rest of it's here. It's a lengthy update, but I would hope you read every word of it.
And commit it to memory.
I'm going to test you.
Thank you. Moving on to Dr. Szymanski, anything you want to pull out from what's posted in board docs?
I think just the one thing from last week, we had our tri-state revisit. That was very joyful. We have thought partners from all around the region come in and they look at things that we've asked for support in looking at. So we presented what we've been doing over the past few years around systemic collaboration in service to a professional community as it relates to our program and things we've been working on together. We've gotten some more feedback. It's really helpful. And it was great. We had a large faculty involvement. Teachers, administrators participated in the visit. And then we had the Tri-State Consortium, some of our initial committee members come back to see us again.
This is from like a year and a half ago?
I think at this point it's actually about 4 years ago.
Oh, they started coming.
It's been years already, which I blinked and there we were.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Moving on to business items. Are there any questions or comments regarding business items 1 through 22?
Since we're talking about music, I just wanted to point out how glad I am that we have live music at our musicals in the middle school and the high school. I don't know about the elementary school, I can't speak to that, but it really makes such a difference to the shows to have live music. So thanks for that, and I'm just glad it's included.
And that's why, like, some of the theater expenses are all, because that's the cost of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I would just second that. Not necessarily for here, but you know, I went to see, I forget what show. It was off Broadway, and it was recorded. It was so disappointing.
Really?
Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's weird.
We think our budget's tight.
I'm sorry. So, any other questions or comments regarding business items 1 through 22? No. Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 22?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to placement and services for CSE. Are there any questions or comments regarding our placement and services for CSE? No. Is there a motion to approve our placement and services for CSE? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Personnel, it's a consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments regarding our appointments, our amendments, our leaves of absence, or our resignations? No. Is there a motion to approve our appointments, amendments, leaves of absence, and resignations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to minutes. This would be for our March 5th meeting. Any questions or comments regarding our minutes? Is there a motion to approve our minutes from the March 5th meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Moving on to second read, this was the policy 6700 regarding purchasing that we looked at the March 5th meeting. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the policy? Because now at second read, we're going to vote on it.
Nothing's changed.
Yeah, nothing.
Right.
No.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve policy 6700?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And now we're going to go back. This is an old business item that we discussed on March 5th. We're going to pick it up. This is the DEI coordinator work plan for the coming year.
Right, so this is a moment where I should be superintendent, so I'm being superintendent, which means I'm bringing to the board a decision I've made based on a lot of input. One, listening to your deliberations here, listening to comments and good questions from the public and community, listening internally, then having Melissa Szymanski and Dr. Janice Mateo Toledo roll up their sleeves to think about what has been the work in the last couple of years relative to all of those good questions and discussions from everyone I've just mentioned, to think about the coming year and what the plan is. And so what I've done here, which is now in the public record, is about the plan for that role, is to say for the coming year it would be a coordinator, but with a work plan that has been fine-tuned, and fine-tuned in a way that we believe can maximize our work in diversity, equity, inclusion in the coming year, with a revised plan for what it means at Hillside, a revised plan for what it means at FMS. Very specifically there, we are refashioning the Courageous Conversations course, and the language there is very important. It started as a racial literacy course. It's going to be broadened into much more of a cultural competency course. The image here, and I'm going to have Melissa step in a little bit to add to the work, because she really worked hard on this. That image really is one that, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, that one is. Because that's why you see it in both my cover memo, which is almost as long as the work plan, but just to emphasize that we're really thinking holistically now as we move forward in our work on diversity. So that, and at FMS and the Courageous Conversations course, that may well end up with a name change, just to better reflect what the course is. It matters, and also it really needs to be brought forward, and part of the work plan for the DEI coordinator will be to spend a good amount of time next year helping to design this year, but then modeling what teaching in that very important and, yes, complex course means. At the high school, it also talks about in the English department working on things. But there is then district-wide work for this work plan next year. There are a number of things in there, but one of those is to be explicit that this role does have a consulting relationship into any DASA moment, to put a word on it, a moment, which is longer than a moment, but that there would be that consulting role. Per the way DASA is structured by the state of New York, administrators do make the final decisions, but there'd be a consulting role, and the involvement there with the expertise that the diversity and inclusion coordinator would bring to it. I don't know, Melissa, if you want to add anything to this. It was a good deal of work, and really making sure that for the key leaders on this, I'm just going to use names now, that's Janice, that's the three principals, that's Melissa Szymanski, with me holding everybody accountable. This is what we've come up with.
So I do want to recognize and thank the people that Bill just mentioned. So the building administrators had a tremendous amount of voice, also thinking about where their buildings are right now in this work, and thinking about what the need was, with the understanding that we are all committed to building teacher capacity and making sure that this work sits both independent and embedded within the program. So what you're seeing here is by building, and so Hillside Elementary School, the curriculum work, in terms of targeted work, thinking of cultural competence, and then think about that wheel, that visual wheel, and basically there's a need to have capacity in those areas, co-planning. Janice will be modeling in terms of facilitation of lessons and co-teaching, making sure that those are really targeted, isolated lessons. The second piece at the elementary school is embedded. So sitting with teams of teachers by leading culturally responsive curriculum enhancements. So think about teaching a social studies lesson and thinking about, again, that wheel and what can we do to better support programmatically within the core content. So there's both this targeted work and there's embedded work. Farragut Middle School, not dissimilar. There's that targeted work. So right now it's around re-envisioning courageous conversations. We've just finished our inquiry completion, that first part of it anyway. So grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, looking at the program with the wheel as our lens. Think, what you're seeing in terms of that graphic is the lens. To what extent are we explicit with outcomes related to each of those areas? And then we are about to get back into a room together to talk about what we've noticed and then how we'll move forward. And again, the name may change, but there is guidance from the state around more of that cultural competence work. And so we intend to be amplifying that in terms of the targeted piece. Curriculum work, serving as an instructional leader. So again, Dr. Mateo Toledo will be sitting with teachers in that core content and helping with that embedded piece and leading that work as well, just like in the elementary school. And then finally at the high school, working with the English department to enhance the use of diverse texts within the curriculum, and then building capacity with regard to equity work. There is a specific need there and interest there, and so that will move forward with the English department. District-wide professional learning, facilitating sessions to enhance faculty capacity in the area of cultural competence, and turnkeying any external work, any external learning that will also be brought back in a more systematic way. Janice is really interested in even with the leadership team, looking at data, looking at disaggregated data and thinking about how that's informing our leadership practices. And so that's an area of interest in terms of professional learning that we can really dig a bit more deeply in and have those conversations and then think about some next steps from a boots on the ground perspective. Portrait of a Hastings learner. There's been already heavy involvement in the restorative practices work together in partnership with Camila by Janice, and so wanting to maintain that and really keeping those leadership efforts moving forward to support capacity building in the area of restorative practices as it relates to the portrait. And I will say, as we're talking about the portrait, everything that I just outlined in terms of the curriculum work is also in the vein of authentic learning opportunities, also aligned with the portrait. So in the other buildings, at the building level rather. And then Bill spoke more extensively to DASA, so I don't need to reiterate that. But Janice is a key collaborator. She likes working with others in terms of the power of the team and taking a look at, what are some, pushing each other's thinking around, like what do we need to be thinking about that any one of us may not be thinking about. So we're looking at that as a structure too, in terms of like how this work is being done, making sure it's being done with, and in terms of multiple voices being involved.
Let me add just really fast, the final paragraph of my cover memo indicates we will look at how this is doing. Mid-year, look at whether this role in a future year might shift from the coordinator to the administrative role. That's a very real question. We will look at that. We think with a more focused work plan that this will help us better understand how to keep advancing the work. And left out in this, maybe because it is something that's been very present, is this role is very active in any of the review and hiring of any of our teaching professional staff. So to date, actively on any of the committees, including those for the 2 recent hires of our new principals, middle school and now high school. So I think if you will, the oversight was because that's actually something going on. But quite important, this has a draft at the bottom and a date because it's a living work plan, and it will evolve as we move forward. But certainly we'll make it more explicit in the next draft of this, that this work plan includes ongoing work of being part of reviewing candidates for hiring in our instructional area or instructional leadership.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I open it up
I
for
have-
questions or comments.
Sure, sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
I have, I mean, I looked at the document, I like everything that I'm seeing in there. It looks like there's a lot of good things, like I actually expressed that when I came in. I also looked at the yearly plan that we had, on the DI since we got here, as well. And there's a lot of intersection with, like, there's a lot of overlap as well. But this one, like, I like the fact that every part has been touched. My question is, how different is this from what it was before? Like, what is the specificity of what is different? Like, what has changed?
That's a great question. So the job description has not changed. What we've done is really focus in on instructional work, direct work with teachers and program.
So
And
before, I'm sorry,
we've limited the scope and been very specific for the upcoming school year around moving capacity and moving program forward.
yeah. So the question I'm asking, I'm sorry, I should have been more. I didn't want you to complete it without realizing that I was very vague. So I have read through this and I like it. So I just want to say that I'm not saying I don't. And it's very similar to what we had before, which we were also happy about. If you can give me specificity of what is really going to happen, very different from what has been happening, because I like what I'm seeing, but I want to, and this is not just coming from me, it's coming from, it's more practical, it's coming from people on both sides of the fence, which I talked about last time we met, what is the
Yep.
is the specificity of the different thing that is going to happen in such a way that it can support kids that are in the gender spectrum that feel threatened because of what is happening, and kids that are not marginalized in the gender session that feel also threatened. And so, like, I'm more about, I like this. I'm not going to say I don't. It's really good, but if I can get some.
No, it's a very good question. Let me start, and then Melissa can fill. In my cover note, which I spent time on to get it right, in the second paragraph, the 2-second sentences speak first. This was co-developed. We had a plan before. I'm not convinced. I mean, Melissa worked so hard on that with Janice. Beyond that, I'm not sure how much was co-developed. In any district, if you don't engage your building leadership in what you're doing, you're not going to get there. And that may have happened before, but now we really made it happen. Thank you, Melissa, for
working with the principals also.
yeah. So plain English, it's working very much with Amy, and I like first names, Amy and Scott and Lou, Melissa, going back and forth to say, Janice, how are we going to get this to work? And Janice raising very good. We've got to speak in names here beyond the role. Really good questions from Janice on how can I really get this to work? Because that's that last sentence there. DEI has to be the work of many hands. There's no organization now in the DEI that is not realizing that one person does not do it.
Correct.
One administrator, not one coordinator, does not do it. Whether you call it
Correct.
belonging or you call it DEI or whatever, you got to get there. It's got to be the work of many hands, and yes, facilitated and led by the diversity and inclusion coordinator. The other thing here, which would be different, is really raising up and securing the curricular teaching aspect of this and the coaching and co-leading and co-planning. As I reached out to several other districts, I'm not naming names right now, they said, oh my goodness, we can never get this position in. You don't want to go down the administrator path because you want to go down a path that teachers will work with and listen to, i.e. a coach, a facilitator, the co-led, co-design. So I think specifically it's how we got to the plan, to summarize, and then 2, really zeroing in on the instructional side, the curricular side, the lesson side, the content side, and adding in explicitly the DASA piece. That is now added in explicitly with a link to a protocol that was one now, And I said to the group, I'm putting it out public, that this is a consultation that needs to happen. Everybody has to keep it confidential. You know, you don't go running around, none of us, to say, here's what we just talked about,
you can't.
right? That's legal and ethical.
Correct.
But we're now exposed that there has to be that consultation in a DASA moment, as I put it.
Yeah, so
I
I'm
don't know if I covered it.
Yes, you
think.
did. I think I like the way you grouped it because it to allow me to, and again, this is not just being the voice to others, and I'm bringing it here, and this includes people across boards of marginalization. I've had people in the Jewish religion marginalization, Palestinian marginalization, LGBTQ individuals, race people that have spoken to me. So I gathered the information I'm presenting. It's not mine. I have my own issues to deal with, so, but I'm just trying to be the voice there. So please pardon me on that.
I'll
So,
just add one very
Yes,
brief
go ahead.
thing, which is when the plan was originally designed, the work plan was originally designed with Janice based on very clear road guidance from the state around what needed to happen in different phases. And so now we are where we are. So there was phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and we are where we are. And the input from the building principals has been very strong right now in terms of saying, okay, so we've done this, X and Y and Z, and here is where we are right now with all of this work, and here's what's needed. And then making sure that, you know, back and forth, meeting with Janice, getting, you know, going through that, meeting with the principals with Janice, like some back and forth until we crafted it to what you're seeing, the draft that you're looking at right now.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slightly different than the state has given us guidance and a roadmap. It's like, okay, and now where are we?
Okay, so I mean, the one that I looked at was actually the year plan that was created. You know,
Yeah, that,
what-
like, spreadsheet one.
the spreadsheet
That's
one.
it.
And I thought some of it came from here. I didn't realize it was prescriptive from the state. But with that said, so just for the community that wanted to, because they thought they were going to wait till the end of the, like it happened last time. So, it's saying that the admin are now going to be part of it, and were they not part of it in the past? Because people are asking what is changing. So were the admin not part of it in the past, or they were part of it?
And in terms of
So we were saying that the principal,
were they part of
exactly.
designing the plan or participating in the work? I didn't
Both,
understand your
both are,
question.
so I'm for the sake of those that wanted the specificity of the response, they want to see what exactly is different from what has been happening
Yeah.
and what is the new
Yeah.
thing that is happening.
So I would say the principals have been far more present and part of the plan right now in terms
Than
of
they
the
were
planning
before.
process, yes. And I would also say that what is different is that the current plan really zooms in, as Bill said, on the curriculum and instruction aspect of things.
So so I have three things here. I was clear on the DASA, which is consultant, which is, for me, I'm understanding it as, okay, let me just go step by step. So the first part, so the admin were there, but they were not that there, so now there'll be more there. So is that fair to say? Okay.
They've been there.
Yeah, I'd rather not use a not. I'd
Yeah,
rather
they've
say,
been
I'd
there.
rather see us building on strengths. So
Yeah,
we-
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
we
building
were there,
strength.
and how do we get,
We were
More-
there, and now we're a lot more there.
Okay, okay.
how do we bring?
You
the
were
work
there,
in?
but a lot more there,
Yeah, I know.
okay?
I don't want a lot of calls tomorrow from the principal saying, no, because
What do
they
you
had
mean
been
by-
there, we were taking the work to a
Yeah.
higher level
What-
Okay.
and
What's
learning
now-
from how to get better together to now get
Okay,
up high.
Yeah.
okay.
And then zeroing in on the ways that Melissa's just
Got it. I
underlined.
just want to
Yeah.
get it out and
No, it's good, it's good.
And then the second one was the co-instruction. So far as it was known, co-instruction has been happening to some extent. So what is going to be different? Because I know we mentioned names, and let me say this again. I have something personal I want to say, but I want to finish with what people have asked me first. But my thing on DEI, just as a full disclosure, is not an individual. I may be saying I don't care about who is there right now, only because I'm trying to get a work that is done and done well. So I'm not disrespecting any expert that I know you guys really trust. Janice, you mentioned her name publicly. So I apologize if people think I'm against Janice. I'm not. So that I want that full disclosure. Hastings is pretty small. But with that said, so the co-instruction piece, was it not being done? Or if it was being done, what is actually going to be different now?
So yes, it was being done. It was being done mainly in Courageous Conversations and Sparks, in that targeted work. There was a very light touch in terms of, I'm recalling, partnering with some teachers within core content. This is a much more systematic way of looking at things.
And broader.
Yeah.
Okay.
And across all 3 buildings, there are things happening. With the coach and co-teaching focused primarily at the elementary school and middle school, the need expressed at the high school level was really around working with the English department. But this is much more systematic in how that's happening. And also, making sure that there is professional learning and training and going to coaching institute and, right, so being able to just do that in a way that's very specific and broader, I should say, and both the targeted form and the embedded form.
Okay. And then in terms of the DASA, I thought, and it's not just me, others in the community had assumed that this individual was a thought partner with DASA. Now, in terms of being it's now consultant, what does that mean? How different is it from the thought partner that this individual was in the past?
So, in terms of our, I'm just trying to pull it up here. In terms of our leadership team, student discipline situation checklist protocol.
Yeah, so it had been there, and again, it was saying now as we listen, it had been going on to a certain extent. Now it's going to happen at any point we're at that moment of a DASA. I mean, called the consultative role, or consulting, bringing the individual into the discussion to say, here's what's occurring. How do we any insights to understand it? It had been occurring. We now are saying through this document, and the superintendent I put my stamp on it, it's got to happen all the time, at that point of the DASA consideration. But given the structures of DASA that are given to us and that we work very well, and Melissa's the district-wide manager on DASA, there's, as you know, a coordinator at each building, that those ultimate decisions are made by those DASA coordinators and then the district-wide manager. But it's bringing the input in at any one of those DASA moments now, tied to that protocol that is in there.
So, I mean, I like what I see, but like I said, I see that my concern has been that the work of DIA is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult. And I was always pushing for the expert-informed work across board, and this is what I see, and I'm happy about it. So, I mean, the community has heard the responses. They wanted to ask explicitly what was happening that is going to be different from whatever gets proposed. My concentration was not on that. I made it clear to all my colleagues, and I would say, personally sitting here, that I think the leadership team has done a phenomenal job with making sure that each facet is touching an expert input. But for me, what I wanted to talk about, and Jody, when I was doing the presentation last time, I know we spoke, but it wasn't, anyway, was to emphasize that expert input, and but more importantly, as Maureen asked me directly, what are you asking? Was asking the fact that I know a teacher on assignment, on special assignment position cannot do a job like this. And so so my ask, which is I know the board has done it. Like I said, I binged on board meetings before I came. We created positions here that the community did not want, that the school leadership did not want, and gave early tenures and all those different things, only because we believed in it, you know. And this position, for the record, I know people may be assuming an administrator role that is going to evaluate teachers or be like leadership team. No way. What my head is, and I want to make it clear, and I know I've made it clear to some of my colleagues, because we've talked about it here, is, and I mentioned it very quickly in passing, all that presentation I was given, it got lost in it. It's like a psychologist. It's like a counselor. Because we have 6 psychologists that are not teachers on assignment. And and again, when it's not going to cost us a dime. This district cares for DEI. I understand other districts wouldn't. But some of us moved into this district because of that. We want that equity, and we are not going anywhere. And people have decided not to go anywhere. But what I don't want to be happening is that there is a culture of things. What I'm saying is no secret to anybody here in Hastings, that people are going to look outside to get their investigations done for them, you know. And that's what is happening right now. And sorry, I don't know what got into the side of my cheeks, but I don't want us to be sitting here, I'm talking to the 7 of us. I don't want us to be sitting here for this thing to be brewing in town, that, oh, let me go to NYS. They would do, if I'm not satisfied with what is happening to my marginalized child. And then they do free investigation and then sue the district. When I know we have the resources here. Because right now, each of these parents that are knocking on our doors, that are blowing our phones up, that are coming to Doreen and everybody else on the other side of the fence and coming to me on the other side of the fence, are asking who to go to with that, like, and I'm like, I don't know, to be honest with you, because a teacher on assignment position, this is wonderful, but a teacher on assignment position cannot be liable for anything they do. And I feel like the 7 of us should think of this more deeply. And of course, it's Dr. Mackessie's pure prerogative to hire who sits in that space. That's why I wasn't trying to dish for people that have reached out to me thinking I was dishing Janice. I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying to say that it's not fair to be prescriptive as board members. And I apologize. Please let her know I apologize for that. But I wasn't trying to do that. What I was trying to say is the toes apart, and we've been begging before some of us joined the board. I've been here for 12 years, or more in this district, was to get that director position, or you get what I mean. I'm not trying to call it a buildings in charge of teachers, and no way. I just want it like a psychologist and stuff like that. So anyway, I know you know what I'm saying. So please, let's think about it, please. So anyway, I just wanted to talk to the 7 of us.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question and comment. I hear what you're saying. I think that a little bit of what you're saying is that the position is separate from the person.
Correct.
So I think that's important to note as well. I have a question about this graph is this like an official graph from someplace? I find it to be very confusing. I know that you guys like it, but I agree with welcoming and affirming environment, high expectations and rigorous instruction, inclusive curriculum and assessment, ongoing professional learning. Of course, all of that makes sense. Then action, identity, diversity, I get, but justice, I'm just curious about, because justice, and then you have activism in there, which leads to values that are being taught and not facts, which I think is not important in a public school. Activism, I don't think necessarily belongs as a way of teaching. And then some of the other terms, like bullying is randomly in there, and immigration, but other things are protected classes, and then you have bias. I just don't understand the what's inside the circle, why it's inside the circle, where it's inside the circle. I get that it's trying to be inclusive, but I don't know if anybody can explain it to me. If we
have access to this?
Yeah, it's on the.
It's a
Yeah.
public document.
You have to blow it up.
Yeah.
The words,
I see it.
yeah, the words inside are like
So
bias, race, ethnicity, religion, ability, class. I thought class was like an old-fashioned word, like you're low class, you're high class. I thought it would be more like socioeconomic status. I don't know, but that might not be right. Anyway,
The 4 circles are from the Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Framework
Yeah.
in the state. And the bold words that are around the center circle and the center circle are both from Learning for Justice. And the 4 bold words are
what's
the
learning for
different-
justice? Is that like something we
It's for
follow?
cultural- It's a strong resource for cultural competence work that we have access to. And action, identity, diversity, and justice are different domains in terms of lenses to look at in terms of learning. So thinking about, learning about diversity, learning where actions have been taken in the past. So
Yeah,
think
that makes
about,
sense to me.
like, women's voting rights, et cetera, like just giving some examples around that. Justice, identity, so thinking about, just legal things that have happened in the system, or, identity, I'm just giving an example of younger students, like, who am I? What do I like? What am I passionate about? Where am I? And how do I identify, essentially? The middle slices here of this circle are topics that are related to also different areas to be exploring in cultural competence. So for example, bullying is an imbalance of power. How does that happen, right? And what are different ways that people are feeling more powerful or less powerful?
So why
And
wouldn't you say like power or power imbalance versus
This-
specifically
It's more
bullying?
It's from the framework itself, from Learning for Justice, from the cultural competence work. So it's theirs, and we agree with it, and we, as we're looking at culturally responsive curriculum and we're investigating courageous conversations, these are areas we were looking at. To what extent are we teaching into these things?
Because
So the framework's from them.
got it. Okay, it just
The
seems.
graphic is from us putting that
Yeah.
together with the state's
It
guidance.
seems so, I'm sorry, I understand where it comes from. It seems so random. Like when you would think that the pies around diversity should be around diversity, and the pies around justice should be around justice, and the pies are, but it's not like that. And you would think that like the protected classes would be put together. And like I said, immigration just seems to come out of nowhere, just as a topic of now. And then my question really is around this idea of activism and what that means. And when you say we're showing activism, what are you
I
teaching
can
there?
at least speak to that. I think it's sort of synonymous with, as we have our children go and learn, want them to go out and be civically active. We're not going to tell them what to be civically active on, but we want them to be active citizens to help, us have a very strong democracy. So we're not
Or
going
wouldn't
to.
we say like civic awareness instead of activism is such a potent
No, I hear you.
polarizing word.
I think here, again, it's an inherited diagram. I'm not bothered by the word activism as long as, because how do you describe activism with the word active? That's not good definition work, Bill, but I'll do it, meaning we want our students to be active. I mean, this other one, okay, I could go work with and use what you've learned. You know, that's sort of what's the spirit of it anyway. But I hear your concern, and the concern would be if you say we're indoctrinating someone to go out a certain path and be active on that. That's not what we're doing with this.
Can I just, on that point, I think, you know, the best way to say it from my perspective is, you know, you're teaching individuals that they have agency out in the world. And that's kind of the, you know, that's kind of the door that you want to unlock, that you don't have to just accept something as the way it is because you're just you and you're not somebody else. So
I understand what it means. I just think that activism is a poor word choice for this, and I think that some of the others are weird and how they're grouped is bizarre.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
think now that you've mentioned it, it's I'm understanding what you're saying, because at the end of the day, DEI is to support marginalized groups, which is the protective classes, like you said. So if it's not very clear, then it's becoming a socio-political, or I get what, it's getting into spaces where that becomes a contention of, when you say activism, is it empowerment is what you mean, or do you mean activism?
So I can give you
and so I think I agree with Doreen on that. The choice of word is important. Also, the other thing that dropped in here is further clarification. So, I mean, I think I was trying to get to my own question about the we have to put this on the agenda again to talk about the director role at some point. But so the more I just don't I'm just trying to figure out what I'm just trying to figure, like, again, it's being asked, what is the explicit work? Maybe, I don't know, Janice is not here, but it's so maybe next time, let me not drag this, but at some point, that explicit work, if we can share it, you get what I mean? I think it's still something that is people are asking, what exactly? How many, like, specificity will be needed for the next time? So not
unless you want
right
to share
now.
something.
I did. I just want to clarify. So activism, like some examples of lessons around activism would be you can take action by registering to vote. You've done something. And another example is if you're seeing an act of discrimination, don't look the other way. You can do something. Right? So things like that. That falls under that activism.
I think voting is what's being active.
Right.
Not registering to vote. That's a passive thing. Anybody can do that. It's like getting out there to vote is
Right.
actually the activism
Right,
part
and
of
that's
it.
the connected part.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think that listen, I think all of these topics are important. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's so narrowly defined that you have to fit into one thing, versus if it's broader, then when something new comes up, then you can figure out where that new thing fits.
So what's your
So-
suggestion?
And
I
that's
think
I
it's
mean-
a work
the
in
work.
progress.
That's the
Isn't
work.
this a work in
Yeah,
progress?
yeah, this is
really?
I don't
completely
think
a
it is
work in progress. I
Okay.
mean, before, if we
Just
had,
because it's taken from something that already exists, whatever you're using, doesn't mean it has to be right for us, and we have to
No,
follow it.
I know, that's why I think we
Exactly.
can-
yeah,
Listen, I'm not the teacher, you guys can do what you want. I'm looking at this, I'm seeing it presented as is to people who don't hear it, and it just seems very narrow and kind of,
well,
I hear you.
No, I hear you there, having watched the team work and then arrive at this. Nothing's perfect, and this is not perfect, but this is a step beyond solely race. This is a
Yeah.
step beyond solely gender. This is a step solely beyond any one of these here. Because we do far more work in this district on this whole set of issues than almost any other district. Scott Wynn, who knows this region so well, arrived and said, I've never been in a district that is so active, at least on the race side. And all of us know we need to include race as a key issue and also others. So that the step forward is at least let's begin to think more broadly. It's a work in progress. We can refine it. It's got a draft at the bottom is quite intensive with a date attached to it, so it'll be a living, evolving document. We can get to a better, if we care to keep a diagram in, we can get to a better one. And even maybe that inner circle should reflect the portrait some, because we had worked on values of the portrait that are more our own, that may relate. But I think if, that's where, at least for now, I saw this as an important image to say we are looking to broaden, not narrow, the work.
Got it. And this is, I want you to know this, my comment is not on whether we should be teaching all these things. It's specifically on what this image looks like
Right.
and how it's included.
Jody?
Not that I don't think we should be teaching all of this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, no, it's helpful.
So I just want to say that I do think of this as a work in progress. I think in many ways it started many, many years ago when Courageous Conversations started. And you can see how it shifts, but I think the things that stand out to me about this are that everybody, the people who came together to work on it, which speaks volumes to me. And also that, for me, when I think about it, this work is so hard. I mean, being a teacher is so hard, and then including this, which is not necessarily what people get trained to do. Like, I was very concerned about how much professional development there would be, or coaching or modeling for teachers to be able to feel comfortable. And I have to say, I love that that's all been thought about and included and kind of embedded in it. And, there may be some people who don't want to do it, and they don't have to do it, but this is a real opportunity for people to kind of move into a very, not the most comfortable area, but to help everybody in the district kind of move there. And and I think if we can think of it as a work in progress and try things and then evaluate and see how they're doing and be as open and collaborative as possible, I think that's great. And I do have one question for you, Bill, which is, in thinking about this and the position, in terms of your experience or what you know, and do other districts have an administrator who's a DEI? Is that a typical position in other districts?
At this point, most districts do not have an administrator, and they think more in the coaching role, because it gets back to, there are really three entry points to change schools and the way it matters to students. You can do it through the teaching, you can do it through the content of what the teachers have, and teaching that's their expertise, their knowledge, their ability at relationships. That's all in that bundle. So you can do it through the teachers themselves, what they're teaching, you do it through the curriculum, and then you can do it through moments of student behavior. And there's also the extracurricular piece. So the best angle then is, how do you have someone in a set of someones, not one, who can help bring teachers along. So an administrator in most schools is not going to sweep in and say, Bing, do this, and it gets done. It's a fostering as opposed to a forcing. So, and actually some very arguably progressive communities around here, as I called around, they're not adding this position.
As an administrator.
In many ways. They may go in the coaching route, but we remain one of the, there are others that have this position, but we remain one of, I still remain one of the few. So and that's where it is a work in progress. I mean, I think that's where we want to fine-tune the work, get it tighter in this way as it's been laid out, co-develop, building on where we've been. And then that last paragraph on my cover memo matters. We will be reviewing and assessing and understanding if going into a future year, an administrator would make that difference. But it's in that higher up point. Many hands will do this. There's some educators who've been at this for 40, 50 years who put the one person in, and it rapidly did not work.
So maybe, as you're talking, made me think that, for me, like a vision down the road would be to include in this even co-curricular places and training, because we can all imagine things that would come up on the field, or when you're doing a play, or all these other places where things can happen with kids.
And that's a place where you can be into the difficulty and the wonder of what it means to be human in all your diverse ways. I mean, just think of the productions and plays that are done in the improvement. Now, my answer was K-12. My answer wasn't higher ed.
Yeah.
Right, higher ed's a very different place as it relates to this work.
So, thank you. No, please. So, even in the K-12 school system, are we saying that the DEI positions are teacher on assignment positions? I know it's coordinator, but I know for a fact that they are not teacher on assignment. They are coordinators like psychologists, and I know that we are using the word administrator because maybe we are defining administrator as someone of authority. The way that I want to explain it and be clear to the community is that when I say, and I know Hastings, we hate administrator heaviness. It's like we are tired of it. It's a public thing that everybody says. So when I say, I don't even want to use the word administrator because I don't want it to be like, oh, another administrator. We have 3 administrators for special ed. We have 3 administrators. Disability actually is one of the protective classes, you know? And so when I say, I'm not even going to say it can be a coach, but I'm saying that technically on paper is teacher on special assignment. We can call it the queen of, you get what I'm trying to say? You can call it any name you want to call it. But it's still a TOSA. That's why the question is, how is it going to be different from what it is now? And my second question is, again, I don't want to put the leadership team on the spot. I want the public to hear because that's what got in here. And I wouldn't want it to be done tonight. But the public would want to know whether all 7 of us are committed to, I know we all are committed, so that was like, that's a no-brainer. We are all committed to DI. But what is our hesitation to make it a director position that is not teacher on assignment? I'm not talking about an administrator because we have some different definition of what an administrator is. I think that's the problem. So let's all of us think why we are hesitant to make it a director position like a psychologist, not an administrator position if that's what is going to make people comfortable, but not a teacher on assignment. So I think that in our next agenda, I want to propose that we talk about it because I think I'm the only one talking about it, but let's hear from all 7 of us why we may not want it to be,
Well, can I?
not now, I'm not putting anybody on the spot, but I just got an emergency, so I may have to whisk away. But I think it's fair for the community to hear it because I'm the only one who seems to be talking. Sorry, Maureen.
A question about the teacher on assignment. I mean, so the title, if you will, would be diversity and inclusion coordinator, no?
That's
or
right.
is there, yeah?
That's correct.
I mean,
Okay.
structurally, Dr. Langs, that is the nature of this role. We call it diversity inclusion coordinator, but it is a teacher on assignment. It is a teacher role. Yeah, what I'm recommending based on very thorough input and a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, and that actually predates this even being, in that sense, a question. We've been sort of discussing and debating this since early fall. It picked up momentum here, so we put this together. Our strong view is this clarifies what the work matters. The quality of the work matters reaching beyond any one person. If that, I want to be really clear. I hope that was clear. The quality of the work from many people matters. So this is an attempt to say in the coming year, let's structure this so we got the best shot at multiple people owning this work, advancing this work, and we will assess it.
Yeah.
We could go down an administrator, and I'm sorry I'm saying this with Dr. Lang now leaving. If we go down an administrator path, we could still be stuck on the one problem, meaning one person. And you don't have the final comment. I think all of you understand across organizations, they have moved rapidly away from the one because it does not work.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I actually like that the role is to get in on a specific, curriculum is kind of the focus, right? And then work, I think it really, it builds a cadre of understanding, training, coaching, which I think is very important. So, I'm in favor. On the chart, I do agree with Doreen, it's a little confusing, so maybe a way to make the visual a little more even legible, like, I think maybe this is more clear. but I like it and I support it, and I like that it kind of builds others' understanding, you know, and being a safe place to ask questions, right? Because not everybody's so comfortable with what should I be teaching, how should I be teaching it? So I'm in support of this.
Yeah, I would just, you know, to be brief, I'm in support of the plan as presented. I think it represents everything we expect of any plan, which is it's based on data, it involves all the stakeholders, it asks questions of what has worked, what hasn't worked. It's you know, very deliberate in the steps it takes going forward. And I think that, you know, the missing piece that we haven't ever really gotten to discuss is, you know, what is it that we want, what isn't working, what does it look like? And I think we have, you know, Scott, a recent administrator who's engaged with this. We have Andy Clayman coming into the high school, who's highly engaged with this. Both have a background that lends itself to this. So my point of view is this is a great plan, and it's going to give us a lot of data on implementation, on how things work, and you know, we come back to it and we reassess once we have real stuff to look at. And on a personal level, as important as I think this is, I want real stuff. I don't want to just have a sort of topical, you know, ontological discussion about it. I think it's a great plan. Let's see what legs it has, and then we can really easily kind of see what works, what doesn't, what might need to change. That's my point of view.
I agree with that. Oh, sorry, go Sylvia.
No, I mean, it's not anything all that in depth that I have to say, but just kind of picking up on the points that Doreen and Maureen had raised about the kind of what the origins of this chart were. I would say that currently the class that we offer that's most associated with this work is Courageous Conversations, right? And we have a synopsis of what the class is, but we don't necessarily in that, other than like a link to the CRSC framework, really explain to folks what the work is steeped in. And I think, you know, this is like an example of that, where it's something that for the folks who are in the know and who are working with it, you have a familiarity and are able to say, this is like the, you know, the origins kind of are, or what are your points of reference? Because, you know, when you look at a math class, you can say these are the standards that we get from the state. And I think that kind of mystery behind it, it feels opaque. And so people don't really understand, A, what it is that the students are learning, and honestly, what the objective of the class is, and what the standards, for lack of a, and again, understanding that this is work that's very complex and is like constantly evolving, and none of us have got it like down, right? And I think, you know, even this conversation about whether or not we keep it as a teacher on assignment role or as a coordinator role, I mean, from what I understand, it seems to me, I haven't necessarily heard an argument for converting that to a different type of, to an administrative position. So I'm in support of the work as it currently exists, understanding that there's much work to be done. However, we haven't necessarily maximized our ability to work with the other folks, you know, who obviously need to be influential in the work as it's going to be operational. But I would say that, you know, again, and this isn't like a finger pointing kind of a thing, it's just more like, where does this stuff come from? You know, what is it that we're actually using as resources? Because I think when people understand what the resources are, it helps kind of like demystify the whole process overall. But there's just more.
Yeah, and I think that tying it to the portrait of a Hastings learner is important. It should be, we take things, but we make it our own.
Yes.
You know, it's not just like trying to put, and then the only other thing I would say is that I totally agreed. One of the comments I wanted to make, I was going to make with you, is that about the courageous conversation, it's incredibly opaque. It's like as clear as mud. You know, like no one really knows what happens there except what you hear from your kids. And my kids' friends, is that it has been and in the past it has been a little like, this is what you should think, not this is how to think. And these are, you know, like, how do you figure things out? But this is the right way of thinking, this is the wrong way of thinking. So I know that, like, with diversity, to me, you know, diversity is diversity of thought, and it's helping kids to, like, appreciate that other people, no matter how much you might tell them that they should believe this, they're not going to. They have their own values, ideas, whatever it might be, but we can still understand and appreciate and respect other people. So it would be great if Courageous Conversations was conversations, because I know the joke in the middle school is that it's like the opposite of conversations.
I'd like to say one thing. I know Dr. Lang has left, but I do feel like what she is saying is why does this position fall under the category of teacher on special assignment? It makes it feel like it's not a specialized position. But a psychologist, she's not here. But a psychologist is its own category. And this is sort of, feels almost marginalized, no pun intended, in that it falls under the category of the teacher on special assignment. Maybe we need to make a new category.
Yeah, I mean, I can cut to the chase on that, and I'm going to put my independent parochial and higher ed and public ed experience. Within the public ed sphere in a collective bargaining arrangement, a teacher has to have a specific arrangement when they come out of the classroom to take a lead. This is a teacher leadership role. In independent schools at Bank Street, they might call this a teacher leader role.
Okay.
And people would race for it for a little while with an extra stipend for a year or two on release. So they would actually use the word teacher leader. You know, and this was negotiated long before I got here with the HTA.
That's very helpful to hear,
with the
to
HTA
understand
leadership.
the technicality of it.
You know, name the prestigious, I'm going to use the word prestigious, Catholic school, they would have found a teacher leader label for this. So I'm honoring the collective bargaining structure in this. So we have a real expert in Janice in this role. So it's a teacher leader role.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. We, you know, contractually and other ways, but it has real meaning. We had a great meeting with HTA yesterday on a bunch of reasons, but they even have an acronym for this. You know, it exists and it's real within a collective bargaining arrangement. And so that's why and it's a great question, because earlier in this you may have heard me say we didn't change the job description of the role, because that's negotiated. There's an agreement on that. This is taking that and say, here's the work plan against that for the year. And I gave a heads up to the HTA as to where we were on this, so they wouldn't be surprised we're talking about it tonight. And that was a helpful distinction to Nate, to know that we were building on that. So I think right now, it's a teacher leader role in so many words. And then how do we, for the coming year, you know, give that more juice, to use a highly technical term, you know, and then you know, but also assess. So a year from now, and we have to be real. In school systems, psychologists have a very narrow function. They work with particular students. They chair particular meetings. They do assessment. For that writ large student body, they're not really there. Witness the social work discussion we're now in is, do we get a social worker or do we get a psychologist? Because the social worker may give us more student time, student face. So that's what we're working with then.
And they're under the teacher
and again, I
contract.
feel sorry having this without Dr. Lang here. I'm not, you know, but we can, you know. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would just say, personally, I don't feel comfortable advising admin on what a role should be. I wouldn't say who should be a chairperson of a department. I wouldn't tell you who you should give tenure to and who you shouldn't give tenure to. I just wouldn't personally feel comfortable saying this should be teacher on assignment, this should be director, this should be admin. You know, I look to you guys to tell me what it should be, and then I say, okay, you're the experts, I'm not on that. So I'll tell Dr. Lang that I feel that way too, but I don't feel it's my place on the board to advise about what a role title should be.
But and there may be other, right now, I mean, I think Jody, who probably has the longest history in all of this work, because you would have been on the board when the district first began moving in formally some of this work. It's a work in progress. I think what this, and I'm pointing to the plan, what this does is say for the coming year, let's get more clarity. Because there's been lots of confusion as to the commitment, yes, but then confusion is what the nature of the work, everything from courses to all the rest. And let's have more clarity on the assignment for the teacher leader, designed with the administrators hand in hand, and we'll assess, is this getting us further, more clarity, more understanding, better outcomes for our students? If it's not, I'll be first in line to say, let's think about a different structure.
I think this does offer more clarity, so thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Moving on to a second public comment, if there's.
Yeah, taking the liberty of moving this
thanks,
microphone.
sorry.
Yeah, Andy Zimmerman, 7 Ridge Street. I don't know if we're going to settle this tonight, but I just wanted to go back to the idea of middle school music and whether it adheres to the regulations of New York State. As I read the regulations myself, and from what I can tell, everybody is supposed to have music in middle school, just like they're supposed to have art and PE and all the academic subjects, and not just the people who are in the ensemble. And as far as I know, I might be wrong, but I believe that there are kids in the 7th and 8th grade who are not in ensembles, and they also are supposed to have music classes. Music appreciation, in fact, used to be, until a couple of years ago, something that was offered to all kids, whether they were in ensembles or not, and I think it's a valuable thing. But at least, according to the state, it's supposed to be offered to the kids who are not ensembles. So you can tell me if I'm wrong about that. I don't know if we're going to get to the bottom of this, but that's why I said we're out of compliance. All right. And I also just want to say thank you for listening to us, and I'm also with the Hastings AMP, hastingsamp.org, hastingsamp@gmail.com. We're gathering strength all the time.
Amping up.
We are, indeed. We're amplifying. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda review, this is going to be for April 3rd. We have one more budget presentation. Thank you, good night. One more budget presentation, and we have a finance committee report. There's nothing else big lined up.
I thought you were saying there was another budget presentation tonight. I was about to just get up
Get
and
ready.
walk.
Yeah, totally.
And the second executive.
It's like, I'm done, people.
Right.
So, all right. So, no big questions there. Moving on to board comments, if there might be any. No? All right. I would just very briefly mark basically 4 years since we stopped for COVID, so it's quite a while ago. Yeah, it was
I
last
said no
week.
talking about COVID.
Sorry, that was, I'm putting it to bed,
Right,
like that.
exactly.
So, and just a general thanks. It's a lot of work for this meeting, and I can see a
thank
lot
you
of work
so
went into
much.
it. So
Yeah.
thank you,
Thank
Melissa.
you.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank everybody.
Right.
You know?
I also want to recognize that it's easier to be an editor than a writer. So, when I make comments, I just think it's important to say that. Sorry.
Anyone else? No? Is there a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So moved.
Oh, is there a second? There's more than two.
Second.
All in favor?
Everyone.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Thanks, Patrick.